Number 10, an apple a day. If you threw an apple at somebody today, that would be assault. Yeah, you're not allowed to do that. You can't huck food at people. Now, then, ever. Let's just not do that anymore. But in ancient Greek days, it was a little different, dare I say. The apple, back then, had quite the symbolism attached to it. The apple was sacred to Aphrodite. This was a symbol for the goddess of love. So, to throw an apple at somebody, that meant you were throwing your heart at them, right? How romantic is that? Just a nice apple with bugs in it. You're like, here you go, there's lunch. Ancient flirting, my friend. The more you know. Maybe those trees in The Wizard of Oz weren't mean. Maybe they weren't mean at all. Maybe they were just trying to express their love by throwing apples aggressively at everyone involved. Number 9, raining iguanas. Okay, we're immediately dipping back into the weird side of this list. Here we go. Back in 2018, this was wild. I read about this and I'll never forget. Lives rent-free right in my head. Florida got another odd headline. There you go, classic Florida. This time it was frozen iguanas falling from the skies. Yeah, how do you not pick up that paper, right? Florida got hit with a massive snowfall, their first big one in 28 years. So these cold-blooded guys started to fall from suburban tree branches, right? They didn't see it coming at all. People were just walking to get groceries and iguanas are freezing and falling off trees right in front of them. The craziest thing is that they're just paralyzed. They're not dead, obviously. So later, they would come back to life after they, you know, de-thaw. Sounds so zombie-like when you say it like that. They're just lying there and then all of a sudden they're like, what day is it? Was it a snowfall? Oh God. Winter has come. Number 8, the Philadelphia experiment. Okay, a little more darker. Let's do it. Perhaps one of the most bizarre tales when it comes to other dimensions. This one has credibility behind it. It pops up on my Reddit feed a lot, so I can't help but not talk about it. The 1943 Philadelphia experiment. This World War II conspiracy theory takes place on the USS Eldridge, this destroyer-class ship. So it wasn't small, it was quite large. A lot of people on board, a lot of heads, a lot of witnesses. And they were conducting on this ship these secret experiments in order to gain power over naval warfare, obviously at the time. Now, one of these experiments was to create this technology that makes the ship invisible on radar. That's the important note. It was supposed to be invisible on radar. But when the generators were fired up, the hull apparently lit up with this green and blue light. Then the ship itself actually disappeared. Invisible in real life, not just on radar. Boom, gone, just like that. It was then seen at a naval shipyard in Virginia before the same thing happened again, and then it appeared back at Philadelphia. Now this sounds a bit intense, but when you hear about the crew on board, it only gets worse. Some went mad after the dimensional dip, of course, while others had physical effects from this cosmic commute. Yeah, some haunting details in that one. Some body parts that got mixed up with, yeah, I can't even talk about it. You get it. If you've seen the Cloverfield paradox, it's kind of like that. Some blooping and blipping, and then some arms getting stuck in some walls. There we go. Number 7, Ellen Shannon. Heading over to the late 1800s for this one. I gotta warn you, it's of course pretty dark. In 1870, we obviously didn't have the same safety requirements as we do today for anything, like at all. For example, if you wanted to read before bed, you didn't have a Kindle or an iPad. Hell, you didn't even have a nightlight, but you did have a kerosene lamp. Always coming in handy, those kerosene lamps. See, Ellen had used R.E. Danforth's non-reactive burning fluid. And dare I say, the obvious happened. The fluid reacted. Yeah, her tomb in Pennsylvania reads, in memory of Ellen Shannon, aged 26 years old, who was fatally burned March 21st, 1870, by the reaction of a lamp filled with R.E. Danforth's non-reactive burning fluid. Yeah, they just called him out right there, right in public on the actual tomb. I gotta say, I agree with that. That's cool. If some idiot's gonna cause your horrible demise, yeah, roast them. Let people know. Let people know who's responsible. That's like Twitter nowadays, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, just so-and-so is an asshole. Send tweet. Boop. It's there forever. Number 6, military dolphins. Yep, I said military dolphins. Here we are, we're almost halfway through our list. We'll get a little more weird now. Iran has plenty of nuclear capabilities, but they also have trained dolphins now too, so, good game, folks. Back in 2000, Iran bought this fleet of trained dolphins from Russia. Just Russians doing things. But they were trained, supposedly by the Soviet Union, to attack ships, and yes, you guessed it, attack people. We have Navy SEALs and military dolphins. Is this Aquaman 2? What's happening right now? Well, recently, and I mean that as in 2018 recent, satellite photos revealed a Russian naval base in Syria with pens that are commonly used for holding dolphins. Yeah, so these dolphins are active, perhaps, right now. That's so terrifying. Russia and the US have a fleet of trained dolphins to detect mines, but now Iran is also in the mix as well. So 3 powers in the dolphin game. What an odd standoff that would be in the water. They're all eating at each other.
Number 5, tooth removal. Here, I found this quote from a dentist in the medieval period who would travel from town to town. "Take some newts, buy some called lizards, and those nasty beetles which are found in fens during the summertime. Calcine them in an iron pot, and make a powder thereof. Wet the forefinger of the right hand, insert it in the powder, and apply to the tooth frequently, refraining from spitting it off. When the tooth will fall away without pain, it is proven." Hey, if it is proven, who am I to say otherwise? Just some lowly YouTube host. If you weren't using your Newton beetle powder to remove your tooth, then it looks like you're going the much more old-fashioned tooth-pulling route. And that was much, much worse. They had rudimentary anesthetics that was possibly used then, but you had to worry about bleeding and infection. I think I'll stick with my beetle newt powder.
Number 4, Rejuveneek Mask. I got another mask for you guys, I know, but I saw this and I just didn't know what to think, honestly. It's a mask that you wear, but it's plugged into a battery pack and it sends pulsations to your face. After, of course, you've applied the toning gel. What the heck is toning gel? I don't know. This is supposed to tone your face, apparently. Your jawline, or I just feel like plunging your face into a mask that's hooked up to a voltage, that's just a bad idea. Oh yeah, and also a bad idea is the mask itself. Look at this thing. I mean, that's a heinous looking mask right there. You can come home from school one day and your mom's gonna be sitting at the kitchen table looking up Michael Myers. Oh, that's not okay. Please don't do horror movie beauty stuff, ladies, please. No, I don't wanna be scared. I don't like scary stuff.
Number 3, Spit Black. Back in the roaring 20s, they had mascara, just like we do now. But unlike the little tubes of stuff we have, they had a block or cake of the stuff. To get it to a state where they could actually apply it to their lashes, they would need to add water. And what's the quickest form of water? That's right, it's just spit. The mascara cake stuff was made of soap and coloring, which you don't really want to put near your eyes. But then, knowing that people are using their spit to apply it, it's your own spit, so I guess if you're comfortable with that, you do you, pal, but makes me think of dudes using their saliva to like lick their eyebrows. Ick.
Number 2, Sharp Teeth. I like Shark Boy and Lava Girl just as much as the next guy. However, that doesn't mean I want to look and feel like a shark. This one just creeps me out. I don't hate the dentist, but I think everyone can agree with me that teeth getting drilled is just uncomfortable. It just kind of sucks. Especially if there's like powdered tooth in your mouth. That's just the worst. It's kind of gross too. I don't know. Well, what I do know, however, is that there are some cultures out there where the ladies get their teeth sharpened or filed. Oh yes, and there ain't no dentist office there either. This is bite the leather, you're in dad's kitchen kind of operation. Oh god. I would honestly talk more about it, but the editor's gonna show some pictures, and I'm gonna have to stop because if I see them, I legit get queasy. I don't want to see that stuff. No thank you, no teeth sharpening. No.
Number 1, Mercury Laced Skin Cream. Secure Gorad's Oriental Cream and take your first step to a new lasting beauty. That's right, over time you too can develop dark rings around your eyes, lose some of those pearly whites, and get stunning black gums. That's because Gorad's Oriental Cream is made with calomel. What is calomel, I hear you ask? It's a mercury compound. Yeah, it doesn't sound so good anymore, does it? While the women of the 1920s who used this product maybe once or twice would be fine, those who used it over long periods of time subjected themselves to mercury poisoning. But hey, Gorad's cream came in white, flesh, and whatever the hell color Rachel is supposed to be.
Number 10, Design Capital of the World. This is more recent history for you, as in 2014, Cape Town became not only South Africa, but Africa itself, first ever city to be designated the renowned title of World Design Capital. When it bid for the WDC designation, South African officials recognized that they face many challenges that could benefit from design as a problem-solving tool. Through its theme, Live Design, Transform Lives, they sought to establish a legacy that would enable the city to make better, smarter decisions to ultimately improve the everyday lives of its citizens. These included examples of public and private collaborations and innovations, urban planning and renewal, sustainable solutions for housing, agriculture, energy and climate change, public sector responses to urbanization, and community building with social cohesion within struggling cities. This designation increases tourism and funding, and also boosts advertisement for travel in other countries. By using design as a tool for citizen engagement in 40 co-designed workshops covering 80 of the 111 wards of Cape Town, they took design inspiration for public art, park spaces, and local business districts. A total of 2,051 people participated in the workshops, meaning African citizens got to be hands-on with planning and see the execution of their community work together. We should take some inspiration from that here in North America. If the lion doesn't get you, they definitely will. Number 9 is the black mambas. Animal poaching is a huge issue in Africa as wealthy tourists ignore animal protection laws and their own safety and troop forward with heads full of blatant ignorance to kill endangered species such as rhinos, elephants, and more. Anti-poaching expeditions aren't new as a result. These groups go out and find poachers, who are both locals and tourists alike, to arrest and charge them before they do any harm. So, meet the black mamba. Rough and tough, what makes them unique is they are an all-women's ranger unit protecting the Balul Nature Reserve, South Africa. While park visitors are relaxing at Balul's many tourist attractions, the mambas are working hard in the background. They collect bushmeat snares, monitor camera traps, and keep watch for evidence of illegal activities such as poisoning or bushmeat kitchens. Alongside their patrols, the mambas run Bush Baby Environmental Education Program, which offers local school children weekly lessons about wildlife and conservation. It's all part of their plan to make poaching a thing of the past through education, inspiration, and food security. Before the black mambas were founded in 2013, poachers would enter the reserve regularly. We've reduced that by 89%, and we've received awards from conservation organizations in South Africa, the USA, and China, says Sergeant Cute Moholongo. Number 8 is the creation of Ka'un City. This ancient Egyptian city, built in 1895 BC, is said to be the world's first ever planned city, rather than a group of inhabitants settling down and more joining the habitation or being birthed into it over time, which is usually the cause of unplanned expansion. No, Ka'un City was different. Rectangular and walled, the city was divided into 2 parts. One part housed the wealthier inhabitants, such as scribes, officials, and foremen. The other part housed ordinary civilians necessary for the economy. The streets of the western section in particular were straight, laid out on a grid, and crossed each other at right angles. A stone gutter over a half-meter wide ran down the center of every street, as functional sewers and restrooms, as you'll learn, were mastered by ancient African people. This is a unique thing to have claim over. Not the toilets, but the planned city thing. Houses were built of mud brick and had beamed flat mud roofs, open courts, and porticos, and also they had the earliest examples of supporting wooden columns. But the city was actually only a temporary site for the workers building the Alahun Pyramid to live in, so it was abandoned after the pyramids were finished. Another grand creation is number 7, the Great Wall of Benin. That fun little quip is actually in regards to the size of this Nigerian medieval kingdom. It's said to be built on scale comparable to the Great Wall of China, but there wasn't one giant wall at all. There was hundreds of walls, a vast system of defense totaling 10,000 miles in all, considered the largest earthworks in the world carried out prior to the mechanical era. Benin City's planning and design are miraculous too, according to the careful rules of fractal design, which uses symmetry, proportionality, and repetition. The city and its surrounding villages were laid out to form perfect fractals. That was also repeated in the rooms of each house, the house itself, and the cluster of houses in the village in mathematically predictable patterns. Large streets comprised a sprawling series of structures for living, stores, and public buildings interconnected by innumerable doors and passageways, all which were richly decorated with the art that made Benin famous. In the early foreign explorers' written descriptions of Benin City, it portrayed it as a place free of crime and hunger, with large streets and houses kept clean, a city filled with courteous, honest people, and run by a centralized and highly sophisticated bureaucracy. Just remember that in the same year, an English professor described London, England as thievery, sex work, murder, bribery, and a thriving black market made by the medieval city ripe for exploitation. But man, did those Brits love to call everyone else primitive. Since we're discussing how revolutionary African cities are, number 6 is advanced construction for historic times, at least in comparison to the European world. There are endless descriptions from visitors to some of these cities that spin tales of intense grandeur that seem almost impossible given the tools and slow progression of society at the time. But Africa wasn't slow, and that's what people don't seem to know, so let's run through some real-life documented examples. Chinese records of the 15th century AD note that Mogadishu had houses of 4 or 5 stories high. A comment verified by archaeologists, houses fully intact and still inhabitable today have been found in Old Dajin in Mali, several stories high, but also with underground rooms, staircases, and connecting halls. Sudan in the 9th century AD also had multi-level houses, also differing in spatial layouts and functioning water systems, and water heating systems for the kitchen and bathroom. A ruined mosque in the Kenyan city Gedi was found to have a water purifying system made of limestone, so as to recycle and filter their water. Multiple palaces found, such as Husuni Kabwa and Mount Fiora, have been found to have chandeliers, murals, swimming pools, and real glass windows. Fueled by oils, many of these cities also had street lighting alongside their citywide sewer and water systems. Had colonialists not blindly rampaged in like children, maybe they could have learned something that improved their societies and made them progress quicker, instead of just decimating others and everything being lost to time.
Number 5. Joan of Arc. Finally, a woman in the Middle Ages. Who'da thunk? Joan of Arc was considered and still is revered the heroine of France for her role in the Siege of Orleans during France's 100-year war with England. Joan of Arc, a peasant with faith on her side, had believed that God had chosen her to lead France in victory against England and had spoken to her since she was young. At only age 17, she had stolen men's armors, a white horse, and like a Valkyrie riding into battle, she had convinced an entire army that she was appointed by God to win. And then did! That's the most badass thing I've ever heard in my entire life. After such a miraculous victory, her reputation spread among France, and upon her capture and death at 19, the Maid of Orleans herself would forever live on as one of the greatest saints and symbols of the country of France. Number 4. Henry V. Another war? All these people do is kill each other. Does anyone fish? Or golf? No one, huh? Just swords and heads, swords and heads. A history itself. This time, England beats France. King Henry V, Prince Hal himself, leans into his kingly duties, demolishing France in what Shakespeare would delve into years to come. The Battle of Agincourt is one of England's most celebrated victories and was one of the most important triumphs in the 100 Years' War. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. Henry V. Prologue. Good stuff. How come these guys didn't just like rap battle or play soccer or something? Like, an arrow right through the chest is way worse than a red card, just saying. Hey, speaking of soccer. Number 3, mob football. I'm not talking about the mafia. Put 1,000 on Brady, would you? I'm talking about mob football, also known as folk football. It's just like our modern day soccer. Town versus town. Except it has an unlimited amount of players. And there's only 2 rules to the game. Get the inflated pig's bladder over the opposing team's lines on the other side of town, and no murdering. I mean, I guess this is closer to rugby? Yeah, this is literally just rugby. This game was played competitively and eventually outlawed at Oxford University in 1555. Just a guy named Jeeves in a polo. Oh yeah, I play mob football at Oxford. Yeah, I'm also in a frat. This game got so out of hand it was banned numerous times in England. There is great noise in the city caused by hustling over large balls from which many evils may arise which God forbid. We command and forbid on behalf of the king, on pain of imprisonment, such game to be used in the city of the future. Thankfully this game has calmed down over the years and now has become the most popular played and watched game across the world. Go Liverpool! Number 2, the printing press. The printing press is a machine that was designed for the mass printing of text, mostly in form of books and newspapers. With an unknown date of origin, first invented in China, this machine, designed in the 15th century by Johannes Gutenberg, was a revolutionary new form of writing which would only change the direction of history with the mass production of uniform text. Long story short, people didn't have to get the world's worst wrist cramp writing Hamlet over and over again. To be, or not to be, 86 more folios? The alphabetical metal keys would be placed into the device and slammed into the paper, pressing ink upon the parchment. You know there's gotta be some books half written in purple ink because they just ran out of black. Come on, we've all been there. Ink's expensive. Number 1, William Shakespeare. The Bard himself, arguably the most influential writer of the English language. William Shakespeare was born in Stratford, England. One of the easiest ways we can look back into the dialogue and lifestyle used by the people living in the Middle Ages. This playwright documents the world in which he lives from 1564 to 1616. Due to Shakespeare's unbelievable talent for building and fabricating an array of diverse stories and characters via players, modern day is able to see the Middle Ages and the similarities and differences the people were experiencing. His plays are based in the environment that they were written in. He writes about diseases, he writes about monarchy, he writes about women's rights. Okay, so no one actually got turned into a donkey by some fairies in the woods, but some of those wars actually did happen, and some of those kings and queens were really twisted. How this man created so many brilliant works and stories, all part of the mystery. What do you think? Genius? Or did the guy have some help? One man in his time plays many parts.
Number 10, Ragnarok. I don't want to set the world on fire. I just want to start a flame in your heart. Yes, the end of times. It's all over. So long as I'm here for your entertainment, everything is going to be okay. Ragnarok is the prediction of end times. All ancient civilizations did this. Maybe we just like talking about it. Maybe we just like thinking we're all doomed. Maybe we're just all a little emo. Who knows? I don't know. Ragnarok is slightly different from other world-ending predictions, as instead of one event, it's a series of events that signals the beginning of the end times. As a gamer, it was kind of like watching Call of Duty fall off. Things were great in Black Ops 2. Things were good. Lots of good maps, fun weapons, perks. It was great. But then they added jetpacks, and you knew it was the beginning of the end. A good thing we never get close to that in real life though, right? Everything's fine. It's good right now. It's good. Number 9, Boulder. If you know your myths and your ancient stories, then you know that there's some stories that are very different from culture to culture. However, there's also a lot of similarities. The story of Balder is both. Very similar to Achilles, that is. A dude has been given the gift of invulnerability. I am invincible. Pretty sick. Achilles had a weakness. It was his heel. And Balder, well, it was a mistletoe. Every guy has his weakness, but yeah, it was a mistletoe. And Loki made a dart out of it, and then the dart got thrown at him, and then everyone was sad, it was kind of a mess, and yada yada. I'm sure this won't have any effect in our world. Why is the ground shaking? Number 8, Loki. Lord of the Tricks, the god of mischief. Everyone knows who Loki is, most likely due to some very successful superhero movies in the last few years. But the same may know him regardless, known for many tricks and evil deeds. His best trick, or whatever you want to call it, was his shape-shifting. Loki has the ability to transform into any creature and any gender. And for the people who don't have the ability to see through these tricks, it often leads to a lot of misfortune. Like previously mentioned with Balder. The dude was up to a lot of bad stuff. Bad stuff. Now he's a superhero, or supervillain actually. Number 7, Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil is the immense and central anchor that is the Norse worlds, surrounded by the 9 worlds, that is, where the gods often meet to talk about god stuff, which is really important, deliberating and all that fun stuff. The tree shares a connection with that of trees in Germanic paganism, culturally speaking, at least. I mean, come on, you can't blame them. There is something powerful about a large stoic tree that has connections and ties to all the realms. It's almost like they knew how important trees were all the way back then. Kinda needed them to breathe. And for a guy with asthma, that's that's pretty important. I gotta breathe. Do I go up a flight of stairs and I'm just I don't even smoke either. Number 6, Thor's hammer. Probably the most recognizable piece of Norse mythology is Thor's thick and heavy hammer. Yes, that was an innuendo. It's a big one. Loki had been getting up to no good, as per usual, no surprise there, and decided to play some more tricks. These tricks got him into some trouble, so he then thought he'd make it up by playing more tricks on the master smiths, the dwarves. Not really a good thought process there. A competition was put in place to see who could make the best gifts for the gods. After a lot of gold and a boat that would fit in your pocket, everyone else was kind of just feeling meh, nothing special. However, that was until the reveal of Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. Nice. That had the crowds oohing and awing. A hammer that would never shatter, always hit its mark, and return to Thor when thrown. Now that's a pretty good hammer.
Number 5, Enlisted Bear. During World War II, a Polish army unit enlisted a real-life Syrian brown bear named Wojciech to serve with them. Because, yeah, what could go wrong, right? I just watched that bear movie, I don't know. Wojciech had been found as a cub in Iran by Polish soldiers and, of course, adopted as their very own mascot. Again, sure, why not? Now, as he grew up, Wojciech became an integral part of the unit, right? He helped carry around ammunition and other heavy supplies that only a bear could carry. Fair, I guess. And he quickly became popular among the soldiers. They all loved him. They would play with him and feed him cigarettes and beer, you named it. He loved it all. He'd eat the glass, probably. He even learned how to salute, a skill he would often perform when given a bottle of beer. He's like, thank you, sir. And he'd open it on his nails. So scary, so scary. Wojciech's presence helped boost the morale of soldiers, and he became a beloved symbol of the unit's fighting spirit, because why, of course he did. After the war, Wojciech was demobilized along with the rest of the unit, and then he spent the rest of his life at the Edinburgh Zoo in Scotland, where he continued to be a, of course, popular attraction. He's like still saluting people and stuff. They're like, it's all good, man, it's all good, you're safe now, you can chill. Today, he's still celebrated as a symbol of the bond between animals and humans, and times of war. That's crazy. They got a real life bear to do that. That's terrifying. I just watched a movie about a bear doing some crazy stuff with some illicit substances, and it seemed way scarier than that somehow. Number 4, Violet Jessop. Violet Jessop was a British ocean liner stewardess who somehow survived 3 major shipwrecks in the early 20th century. Not 1, not 2, 3. That's crazy. She's known for all these incredible tales of survival and her courage in the face of disaster, again, numerous times. First off, 1912, Jessop was working on board the RMS Titanic when it of course hit an iceberg and sank in the North Atlantic Ocean. She managed to escape on one of the lifeboats, one of the few lifeboats, might I add, and survived the disaster. Just a few years later, 1916, she was working on the HMS Britannic when it struck a mine and sank in the Aegean Sea. Again, Jessop survived and managed to make it to safety. Somehow. Now at this point you're like, okay, she's not gonna do it a 3rd time, right? No possible way. In 1940, Jessop was working on board the RMS Queen Mary when it too collided with another ship and suffered significant damage. So once again, Jessop survived another disaster and went on to work another ocean liner for many years. Yeah, she still worked on ocean liners after all 3 of those. She's like, oh, it is what it is. Like, what? Are you kidding me? Jessop's incredible tale of survival has of course made her a legendary figure in the history of ocean travel and a symbol of courage and resilience in the face of disaster. I'm baffled by this. That's crazy. You think after the 2nd one you definitely quit, right? Incredible. Incredible. Number 3, the Dybbuk box. I don't like haunted items. This one here, definitely a haunted item. My ears are draining as I'm doing this, so I'm like, ah. It's getting louder all of a sudden. This small wine cabinet got some attention after being sold on eBay back in 2003. Yeah, remember eBay? Me neither. The box was purchased by Kevin Mannis. Now, shortly after, he claimed that said box was haunted and had caused him and his family to experience a series of horrifying events and health problems. And of course, paranormal activity. How do you sell that? Hey, want this? No, not at all. Sounds like it's a terrible idea. He eventually sold the box to Jason Haxton, who ended up writing a book about his experience. Yeah, it was that bad. Some believe that opening this box can release malevolent spirits into the world. Now, its origins here go back to a woman who survived World War II. This box came from her estate. So the history behind it, it's dark and it's seen some days, that's for sure. And now it lives at the Haunted Museum, rightfully so. Remember that viral video of Post Malone touching this random haunted artifact? That was this box. That was the same one. Now he's falling off stage and stuff. No idea what's going on with Post. Zach Baggins, please keep an eye on this box. Thank you so much. Hit that thumbs up for ghost-proof glass. We really like that. It's the same glass they used in the movie 13 Ghosts. They just have that around the Dybbuk box. Matthew Lillard watches it the whole time. It's lovely. Number 2, Pompeii eruption. Let's hope this one doesn't happen again, because hot. Once a flourishing Roman city located near the Bay of Naples in Italy. That was, of course, until 79 AD when Mount Vesuvius decided, I'm gonna explode. I'm gonna go off and bury the entire city and all its inhabitants under layers and layers of ash and pumice. How scary and horrible is that? The eruption was so powerful that it wiped out all life within a 16-mile radius. Yeah, it makes you think about Yellowstone National Park a bit, doesn't it? Or if this terrifying, she does some random shit. Pompeii remained buried and forgotten for almost 1700 years until it was rediscovered in 1748. Today, Pompeii is, honestly, it's amazing. It's an archaeological site that offers a glimpse into ancient Roman life with well-preserved ruins of homes, public buildings, streets, artwork, you name it. There's a restaurant that's open now. They reopened a restaurant they found buried. That's incredible. And there's also a great amount of people who steal from this ancient landmark because humans are so stupid. Yeah, how to get cursed. This is how you do it. Listen up. Tourists would steal fragments of monuments, literally pieces of the city they would pull out and then put it in their pocket. Yeah, put a little bit of Rome and take it home on our flight. And then put out my lovely fireplace there. That's great. 100 packages a year will get sent back to the archaeological superintendents, most of them being accompanied with a letter explaining all the bad luck that occurred after they took the piece. Yeah, don't take haunted pieces of Rome home with you. Don't take Rome home. That's what they should say. I'm gonna make a shirt and say, it's because they don't take Rome home. Everyone's like, what does that even mean? I'm like, watch the video. I don't know, there's a QR code on the back, scan it. And finally, number 1, James Dean's haunted car. James Dean's love for fast cars was well known, but sadly, because one of them was haunted. Apparently, let's talk about that one. One of these cars ultimately led to his tragic death at the age of 24, but some are now convinced that all of his cars were cursed in some way, shape, or form. There's a car curse, if you want to call it that. Dean's first vehicle was a Triumph Tiger T110 motorcycle. Now, it was involved in an accident that left him with a broken leg, which, where I'm about to go with things, is not bad, considering. His next car, a Porsche 550 Spider, is the one that he famously died in after colliding head-on with another vehicle. Much worse than a broken leg, in my opinion. Now, that's already tragic enough. That's dark history right there. Could probably end the point. But after Dean's death, things happened. Afterwards, the Porsche was sold off and quickly became infamous for causing more accidents and more weird deaths. One of its owners even reported seeing the ghost of James Dean sitting in the passenger seat shortly before they crashed. That's really jarring. That would make me crash. If I saw that beside me, I'd be like, okay, let's see you later. Now, that car disappeared from public view in the late 1960s and has since been rumored to be hidden away by some collector who believes it to be cursed. So great, out of sight, out of mind. We love that. Another Porsche that James Dean owned was destroyed when it caught fire while being transported by a trailer. So 2 haunted cars. But a third Porsche that he'd ordered never made it to him because it was involved in an accident during transportation that killed that driver. So whether you believe in curses or not, there's no denying that James Dean's car collection has some dark, tragic history. Something's going on there, for sure. I don't have my license, and you know what? After that last point, I'm walking everywhere. That's it. I'm just speed walking everywhere with that big goofy belt. That's it. None of this, just this. That's so stupid.
Number 10, long neck. Look, this one probably isn't a surprise to anyone. There must be like 20 documentaries on the subject alone, but today we're talking about the long-necked women found in some African cultures. In a nutshell, you pile on gold rings around your wife's neck until she's impersonating a totally winnable ring toss game at the county fair. The end result is a neck that's long just as the day is long. Pretty long. And in these cultures, this is considered very beautiful. Now, who am I to judge? I can't. However, as a lawyer, doctor, detective, and fireman here at Bumblebee, I'm gonna not recommend the giraffe look. While at first glance it may look like the neck is being stretched, it's really the shoulders that are being dropped forcibly by having so many rings piled up on your neck. That's not healthy for you. Anyone in the comment section that has played contact sport will tell you that dropping your shoulders like that is not good. I like my thick neck the way it is, thank you very much.
Number 9, lead cosmetics. Did anyone know we still sort of do this today? Are we insane? Lead has been used in makeup for an extremely long time. It was found in cosmetics back in classical antiquity, so that's as far back as the 8th century BC. In the 18th century though, women would mix lead with vinegar to make themselves look more and more pale, which was a beauty standard back in the day. Gotta love looking like you never see the sun. Now, while the white lead that was used wasn't easily absorbed through the skin, the mixture of white lead with other chemicals and ingredients to create makeup and other products did indeed cause lead poisoning. And even though people knew this, they continued to keep on using it?
Number 8, jiggle machines. Oh, the great effort people will go to not make any effort. The self-exercisers or vibration machines were a popular fad back in the 1950s and 60s. The idea? Lose weight fast and easy with the help of modern science and machines. Trouble is, they don't really work at all. In a way, it's pretty similar to the snake oil men of the past. A common issue, a weird solution, and then a great marketing, well, that would make for a fad. Someone had to just make bank on it, I know they did. I mean, I get the appeal. I do. I wish I could be a 1950s housewife with a vibration machine, so I could be beach ready. But being a 1950s housewife means I'm so busy. But with a belt machine, it means I can keep my hands free, so I can reach for my favorite brand of menthol cigarettes and my third morning martini. Boy, I sure love this modern world. Wow.
Number 7, ear scoops. When I think of all the things I use a scoop for, I think of ice cream and sugar for my tea. Well, now I'm going to be thinking about how people in the Viking era, all the way to the later post-Tudor times, used to scoop out their own earwax. Yes, an ear scoop was a tiny little brass or copper spoon with a twisted handle that went to a point. The spoon part was used for scooping, while the pointed end was used for pooping. No, I just wanted to say that. It was actually used for cleaning the fingernails of dirt. Thanks, ear scoops. Now I'm never going to look at a spoon the same way again.
Number 6, Hangover Mask. Okay, picture this. It's 1946. WW2 is over. Life's getting back to normal. You live in a major city, so you decide to take a night on the town with your friends. Well, one too many Manhattans later, and, well, you're not even sure if you're still on the island of Manhattan. You have what the drinkers of the world call a hangover. Let me know in the comments without too much grim detail about your worst hangover. What was your poison of choice? I'm curious. Many men and ladies have found themselves in bad places in the morning after so many drinks, only if there was something to cure said hangover. Well, ladies, you're in luck. The Hangover Mask aims to cure that. It's basically just a mask with plastic ice cubes. However, I'm gonna get a little personal and say that every hangover I've ever had, I didn't need a face mask. I needed some water and a bucket since the bathroom was too far away. I don't know why would your face need to be cold? I don't really understand that part. I don't know.
Number 5, the Prohibition era. The Prohibition era was a time where there were restrictions placed on the consumption of alcohol, which of course was done with a ban being placed on the production, importation, transportation, whatever portation, and sale of alcohol by the US government, all from 1920 to 1933. A real boring time. Not really, no one listened to it. Of course, this ban certainly didn't stop people from producing or consuming alcohol. It was just done in sneakier, unsafer ways. The black market for alcohol was booming as people began to drink redistilled industrial alcohol instead of, normal drinkable stuff. This is all pretty well known, but one super sketchy thing that's not widely known is something that the government agencies did to curb the black market sales. They poisoned the industrial alcohol on purpose that was being repurposed for drinking. So yeah, some villain stuff right there. Not just poison in a way where the consumer would get sick and maybe not want to drink it anymore, which is already horrendous enough, but they poisoned the alcohol with lethal chemicals. It is thought that by the time that Prohibition ended, at least 10,000 people died from this act alone. This event is still one of the strangest and deadliest decisions made by government officials today. I mean, cut to today, everything's legal now it seems, but there was a time where it wasn't. Number 4, not every state. Being a Canadian at least, we're seeing things become legal all of a sudden, and that's weird. I'm 28 years old and I'm like, what? This is legal now? Okay, that's weird. It's odd, but we saw this happen in Prohibition as well. Many governors at the time refused to throw away money towards enforcing or policing this alcohol ban. Maryland, for example. Okay, Maryland never even enacted the enforcement code in the first place and eventually earned a reputation as the most stubborn anti-prohibition state in the Union. Nice. New York followed and repealed its measures in 1923, and slowly but surely, it all just went away. But some states did the opposite. They were all for the ban. Yeah, nerds. Kansas and Oklahoma remained dry until 1948 and 1958, and Mississippi remained alcohol-free until 1966. That's like 33 years after the passage of the 21st Amendment. Like, guy, can we click refresh? Can we move on? I'm very thirsty. Thank you. Number 3, the Kensington System. All right, Queen Victoria. Let's talk about you a little bit. Victoria was brought up under the Kensington System, which if you haven't heard of it before, it's pretty awful. Yeah, I thought I was grounded growing up. This is Victoria's mother, Duchess Victoria of Kent, created this Kensington System to control her daughter's life. I mean, she literally isolated this child from friends or family members, you name it. Her mother did this all to keep her pure. The system sounds awful. Her mother would monitor her every single action, including who she can see or even speak to. Victoria only had 2 friends growing up her entire life. She had her half-sister, Princess Feodora of Leiningen, and the Duchess attendant, Sir John Conroy. Oh, and the Duchess's attendant, Sir John Conroy, well, his daughter, Victoria. 2 friends your entire life. That's awesome. I mean, I only had 3 friends growing up, but 2, that's just cruel. She shared a room with her mother until she was queen. She literally couldn't walk down the hall to go to the washroom without her mother being by her side. Victoria has reflected on her childhood, and she said that she hated John Conroy for manipulating her mother. She actually referred to him as demon incarnate. That's a hefty burn from Victoria. Number 2, Al Capone's brother. What's going on with that guy during the Prohibition era? What's the other side of the family doing this whole time? We don't hear about him. Siblings can be the exact same. My brother and I were the same person pretty much. Al Capone and his brother, they had to separate a little bit. They had to play different paths for a bit. Not homies for a bit, it seems. A little different. Al Capone's oldest brother was a Prohibition enforcement agent. Yeah, how ironic is that? Al built a criminal empire built on illegal liquor in Chicago back in the 1920s, but Vincenzo, the eldest of the 6 Capone brothers, he had changed his name to Richard Joseph Hart, of course to hide his identity, and after working for a bit in the circus, Vincenzo settled in Homer, Nebraska in 1922, and eventually he was a special officer assigned to investigate bootlegging. Now after he lost his badge on suspicion of theft, Vincenzo reunited with the Capone family in 1940. He met back up with Al in Miami and started to get in on that family cash that he's been missing out on. And finally, number 1, ice mask. Today you can go on Amazon and get a therapeutic gel face mask for like $20. If you're stressed out or trying to avoid puffy eyes, bam, throw this in the freezer for a hot minute and you're set, just like that. You can make your own aloe vera honey gel mask if you feel like. Just click any vlogger that says the word wellness in their bio and well, good luck. Back in the 40s, Hollywood makeup artist Max Factor Jr. created the first ever face mask to reduce facial puffiness. Yeah, what a magician. And it looked way cooler too. Again, pun intended. They didn't use freezer gels back then, instead just, well, a bunch of ice cube shaped containers that froze individually on your face. It was an ice cube tray mask, rather. It was actually invented to fight hangovers. That's one of the main reasons. How fun is that? Now, it's a shame that this design never got, caught on, because the ones today, they're no good. They're too cute. They're not cold enough or big enough. Imagine busting this mask out during a lecture. Imagine having this underneath the isolator. You could do anything you wanted. You can invent anything you wanted. I don't know, sound off below.
Number 10. The Doomsday Book, 1085. The Doomsday Book was created under William I, also known as William the Conqueror. Like, you're already the first, man. You don't need two names, come on. This guy basically drew up a book to document people's money so that he could tax them. Oh yeah, this is the very first time surveyors went town to town and recorded how much money you would owe for simply just doing you. Men would show up at your house asking how much money you made and document your spending habits. 5 shillings on groceries, huh? Okay. And 5 on that phone plan. Look, tax season's coming up, Arthur. It's not looking good, man. Talk about a bunch of crooks, huh? Imagine owing someone money for just trying to make an honest living. Yeah, thank God that didn't catch on, right guys? Oh, speaking of, I gotta phone H&R Block. Number 9, The Crusades. A 3-part miniseries spanning over 200 years. These bloody and ruthless wars were battled between Muslim and Christians for the proprietorship over sacred sites and the land in the East Mediterranean. A 3-part miniseries spanning over 200 years. These bloody and ruthless wars were battled between Muslim and Christians for proprietorship over sacred sites and land in the East Mediterranean. Wars that resulted in 6 million deaths. The Knights Templar, a brotherhood of highly trained soldiers horseback bashing their way through the East. These guys were the real deal, almost like the Navy SEALs of their time. We've seen these paintings. The elite fighting force with the red cross painted on their chests. I wonder if they had to do a Hell Week. These soldiers were the most trained and savage fighters in all the Christian armies. Richard I leading the 3rd and final crusade, earning him the name Richard the Lionheart. Back then the names were always something so aggressive and scary. It was never like Richard the Clownfish or Henry the Pygmy Goat. No, we need fear. Way more fear. Number 8, the Magna Carta. The year's 1215. We need some laws, people. This document was one of its kind. A document setting out the laws and limitations from the common man to King John himself. A legal system written down so that there are clear do's and don'ts. No free man shall be seized, imprisoned, dispossessed, outlawed, exiled, or ruined in any way, nor in any way proceeded against except by the lawful judgment of his peers, and the law of the land. Did you get all that? Write that down. Except women. They don't have laws. And they can't act in plays. Sometimes people needed to face the music. And even animals. Huh? That's right, animals. Being tried in a court. A lively and popular event trying any law-breaking animal from goats to pigs to even chickens. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, did you, Mr. Feathersworth, peck the floor, yes or no? Objection, Your Honor, leading the witness. My brain can't fathom this, guys. Number 7, the Battle of Bannockburn. This infamous battle between Scotland and England was one of the most important battles of the Middle Ages. The end of the bloody war for independence. Basically, Scotland was like, yeah, we're gonna go over here and roll our R's. The gruesome wooden wars were caused by the English invading Scotland in 1296. A leader slowly rising the ranks, William Wallace, the guardian of the King of Scotland himself, holds off the English forces and is knighted a hero to Scotland. Unfortunately, like every hero back then, he was also hated. He was captured, hanged, drawn, and quartered. Like, why do you have to do all that after he dies? Like, he's dead. Not fun. The battles between Scotland and England ended in 1314 with Robert the Bruce securing Scotland's independence, adding like 45 more dialects to the UK. Freedom! Number 6, the Black Death. Ooh, talk about a curveball. The year's 1348. People are saying things like, don't let the bed bugs bite. Clearly not a very clean and safe time. The Black Death, aka pestilence, aka the Great Mortality, or simply known as the Plague. Single-handedly the worst pandemic ever recorded in history, wiping out somewhere between 70 to 200 million people. Ooh, now I get where bless you comes from. Someone sneezed back then and everyone's dead at 14. This is where we see those doctors in the terrifying bird outfits with the long noses stuffed with garlic and herbs. Excuse me? Yeah, he's not wearing a mask. I'm just trying to watch a cat publicly get skinned. Yeah, 6 feet please. Some doctors prescribed urinating on a person so that the bad smell would drive out the infection. Can you imagine? Just a doctor writing you up a script and go ahead and pee on yourself about 4 to 5 times a day. Take with food. Should be gone early next week. And just let me put my mask back on here before you leave. There you are. The plague started in Europe in October 1347 when 12 ships from the Black Sea docked at the Sicilian port of Messina. Most sailors aboard the ships were already dead, but those who were still alive were covered head to toe in black boils that oozed pus and blood. Ugh. Sometimes the Black Death included fever, chills, vomiting, diarrhea, temporary loss in motor skills, and then, of course, death.
Number 5. Queen Victoria's name change. Every year on May 24, we set off fireworks, then we have way too many hot dogs. It's the best. We call it Victoria Day, right? It's for sure called Victoria Day, right? Well, back in 1819, Victoria was christened in an almost private ceremony. It was small, obviously. Victoria's uncle only let a few people attend. Like I mentioned in part 1, she had an isolated childhood with the whole Kensington System. That was no way to live. But even the day she was christened, trouble awaited. Her name was Alexandrina Victoria, and at the time, the name Victoria was not regal. It was of French origin, almost an odd name to have at the time, so she was immediately advised to change her name to something more traditional. But as our calendars can definitely confirm, she said, nope, I'm good. Victoria Day. Yeah, it's definitely Victoria Day. Number 4, tattoos. I only have the one tattoo, but I've always wanted more. Just not so good with needles, you know? I got my eyebrow pierced and I fainted. It's a fun fact, I have a little scar there. Not great with needles. Some of the designs are so beautiful on tattoos, the amount of pain you all sit through, I'm impressed, honestly, mad respect. The tattoo craze really took off once Queen Victoria's son, the Prince of Wales, he went and visited Jerusalem. And of course he saw copious amounts of body art and was inspired. Inspired, we'll say, yeah. So upon his return, he was all about ink at this point. And the Prince of Wales, well, if he has a sleeve, well then maybe I can have a sleeve, right? What's going on? It wasn't a sleeve, really. It was a cross. The prince got a tattoo of a cross in homage to the Crusades. So if you're gonna try and convince your parents to let you get a tattoo, just, you know, tell them the Prince of Wales did, right? You're just trying to be a royal. Number 3, Gym Day. Believe it or not, there were around 200 gyms across Europe during Victorian times. Yeah, just like 6 good lives. You're like, what's this about? Even Victorian dudes skip leg day. How great is that, okay? It's not just you. These gyms weren't bright, they weren't open, they weren't well ventilated, they weren't motivating, and definitely not safe. None of those, definitely not. No, Victorian gyms were reserved for the upper class, obviously. Grab your pocket watch and blazer, Ezekiel. We're doing squats today. These machines also were not ideal. They were designed as antiques first rather than their purpose. Also, half of these look like saw traps. Like, are you kidding me? No way I'd bend my arm around any of these devices. No way. All those wooden wheels? No. I'll stay weak and brittle, thank you. Number 2, ghost photography. Had to look back. I don't like talking about ghosts. As if the reanimated corpses coming back to life while they were ringing a bell wasn't scary enough. Yeah, let's talk about 1800s ghost photography. The camera was a hot new invention at this time, so tales of ghosts and spirits were now easily believed. Yeah, obviously, when you have a photo of a see-through woman, you're like, that's pretty terrifying. A big name in the ghost game was a man named William Thomas Stead. He was born in 1849, and Stead was the son of a Congregationalist minister, and at the age of 22 he was appointed as editor of Northern Echo, which was a regional newspaper in Darlington. So far, so good. This British medium, Richard Borsonol, featured a photo of W.T. Stead and a real spirit. Yeah, imagine that. Imagine a day where somebody being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize also poses for photo ops with ghosts. You're like, do we believe all of this or none of this? What's going on? This is so scary. And finally, number 1, music for eternity. Before we wrap up this wild part 2, I had to include perhaps one of the creepiest patents of all time. Patent numero 9,222,059. Yeah, the number is going a little bit higher. This one got me thinking. I wanted to end this video off on this note. I like this idea. Maybe, I don't know yet. Music for Eternity Systems. Okay, this patent is not from the 1800s, but rather 2015. I know, it's not Victorian, but when else am I gonna talk about this, really? The idea here is that you could stay connected to your loved one by using a solar-powered digital music player. The best part here is the patent details how surviving family members now have the ability to update, revise, and edit stored audio files and programming after burial. Yeah, next Rihanna album, no problem, I got you. There's a speaker in the casket and there's a headphone jack on the tombstone, so we can listen together. And then we can decide if we hate the album. That's creepy. I wouldn't do this. Would you want this? Sound off below if you'd want, you know, big shiny tunes playing for eternity after you die. I would do the Titanic theme song, just make everyone so sad all the time. Number 10, Animal Heaven. This was pretty odd, and we're still talking about it, rightfully so. Coco the gorilla. She was a famous primate known for her ability to communicate through sign language. We've all seen that video with her and Robin Williams tickling each other laughing. It's heartbreaking, it's beautiful. Gorillas are very smart and very strong, so strong. Francine Patterson, who was Coco's trainer and of course the closest human around to Coco, was asked in an interview how deep their conversations with Coco would actually go. The caregiver showed Coco a skeleton once and asked if it is alive or dead. Coco signed, dead, draped. Draped means covered up. Then they asked, where do animals go when they die? And then Coco said, a comfortable hole. And then she gave a kiss goodbye. Yeah, philosophical debates followed, of course, because what was she referring to here? Was Coco being referred to being put into the ground, literally? Or was she talking about an afterlife? A comfortable hole in the afterlife world? I don't know. Gorillas are so smart. And again, so strong. Number 9, Derek Amato. What started with tragedy ended in symphony. Here we go, I had no idea this was possible, and now I'm questioning everything. Derek Amato is a self-taught pianist who gained worldwide attention after a traumatic brain injury caused him to develop acquired Savant syndrome. Derek was diving into a shallow pool back in 2006. Now his concussion actually made him lose some of his hair and some of his memory. It was bad. But in a bizarre turn of events after the accident, Derek became a musical genius. Guy was killer on the keys, who knew? This condition allowed him to access exceptional music abilities that were for sure not around before the accident. Amato actually released his own album titled Life in the Keys. That's incredible. Tried so many times. Number 8, Katullan. A Mongol princess and descendant of Genghis Khan. Let's talk about her. Katullan is known in history for her undefeated wrestling abilities, if you can say that. She was said to have issued a challenge to any man who wanted to marry her, stating that the first must defeat her in a wrestling match. Now, despite many attempts by many men, Katullan reportedly remained undefeated, with some accounts suggesting she won as many as 10,000 matches. Yeah, Tinder, but make it exhausting. Sure. Instead of a super swipe, she's getting your legs swiped? I don't know. A super choke? Her story has become a legendary tale of strength and independence in Mongolian history. And also, how terrifying is that woman? Imagine being like number 6,000. You're like, I don't think I'm gonna do it. I don't think I'm gonna tap her out. I really have no clue. Number 7, Hector. I'm not referring to the Greek hero Hector. No, not this time. Not this time, Bumblebee. No, I'm referring to the cloud that was named after him. Yeah, we're talking about clouds now because, why not? Hector is a famous cloud formation that appears in the Tiwi Islands of Australia. Now the cloud appears from September to March every single year, every single day, which is terrifying. What's going on here? The area's unique weather patterns are quite the spectacle. The name Hector's thunderstorm, or simply Hector, which I'm more fond of, that name also comes from a powerful storm that struck the area back in 1930s. A World War II pilot named it Hector, and that's how memorable it was. It's still going strong today. Yeah, today, even right now, I guess, yeah, Hector is still going. Tomorrow, Hector's gonna disappear. It's the last day to catch Hector. It's right now. Go get your last minute views in to Hector. That's crazy. I didn't realize that was today. At this point, he's a popular tourist attraction. Visitors can go and take boat tours to witness the spectacular lightning displays surrounding the storm. Me personally, I want nothing to do with that. I watched Nope recently, so no, this one freaked me out. I don't like clouds that show up on the regular. I don't know. Clouds with a schedule, I'm all set. This next one here, kind of the same kind of thing. Here we go. Number 6, Medieval Sky Battle. This might happen soon. I don't know. Aliens, who knows? Short and sweet, this one. This looks like the inside of my old high school locker, first of all, but this is actually medieval art. This Nuremberg broadsheet shows us a battle, an Avengers level threat, really, if anything. This battle took place apparently on April 14th, 1561. It was an aerial battle involving, I don't know, globes, crosses, tubes. You tell me, I don't know what's going on in the sky, but Iron Man is nowhere to be found. These cigar-shaped UFOs have been breaking the internet recently, and I'm not gonna lie, they kind of look like what we're seeing in that medieval art. Maybe this is the same vehicle. Maybe it's the same battle. Maybe it's gonna happen again. People viewed this event as a divine warning. Yeah, obviously, you don't say. What else are you gonna call that? UFO is flying around, someone's like, I have a bad feeling, Abraham. I don't know, this looks a little odd.
Number 5, the League of Nations. World War I, she was a little bit of a doozy. Unlike some wars, World War I actually changed a lot after it was said and done. Borders changed, lines on maps, empires fell, some rose. Political ideas changed, and the history of Europe's future was sealed the second the ink dried on the Treaty of Versailles. After the nations who were involved with the war took stock of what happened, and it was clear we could never let this happen again. So the League of Nations was created. Beta UN, if you will. The idea was simple: peace, disarmament, and to step in when such horrific things were to ever happen again. I'm sure they won't. Well, the planning didn't go very well, and when it was finished, the US ultimately didn't decide to join when they were one of the founding members. Ooh. Mind you, the US had a different mindset on foreign wars back then, but they were still involved. The League dissolved shortly after the Second World War ended.
Number 4, flappers. What a fun word they've been. In August 1920, history was forever changed when the 19th Amendment was passed, finally giving women the right to vote. Now look, in a list of ridiculous events, I'm adding this because it took a ridiculously long time to happen. Yeah, a little twist there for you. At first you're like, what? Relax. We're working. This was post-World War I, when women were still working all these jobs, high-paying jobs, might I add. So now there's no way they're gonna let those go. There's momentum in the workforce. So come August 1920, American women got the right to vote officially. Then Margaret Sanger came along the same year, which led us to women's right to birth control. A lot of momentum. Like Big Ched mentioned earlier, Prohibition ended legal alcohol sales, but with jazz and women's independence post-war on the rise, you couldn't stop all this momentum. Thus, the flapper girl was introduced to American slang. Yeah, smoking in public, drinking and dancing at jazz clubs, all things that were upsetting their Victorian lineage before them. Oh, you want to dance to jazz and have fun post-war? How dare thou? You want to show your calf after working doubles during a war? How dare you? Put those caps away, put that out.
Number 3, the Russian Revolution. Revolution, comrades! The 1920s were a crazy time, man, and if you look at the history between the US and Russia, it's almost like a hero and a villain origin story. Okay, hear me out. World War I was a bad time for Russia. They dropped out in early 1918, shortly before the whole thing ended. Why? Because the communists were there to take over. That's just how it went. Russia went from a 300-year Romanov rule to communism within a few short years. Safe to say this was having a great effect on the already struggling nation. It seemed that the harder things got, the more communist Russia got. When looking at the states after World War I, for the most part, it was a huge financial gain. And besides being the decade of gangsters and bootleggers, this was the start of many corporations and brands, like Taylor mentioned. It seemed as things got better and became more capitalist. Interesting indeed. Duality.
Number 2, the Ponzi Scheme. We've all heard the term Ponzi Scheme at one point or another, but what does that even mean? Who is this man? Where can I find him? Why are we so mad at him? Why is he scheming so often? Why? Who does that? A Ponzi scheme is of course a sham of an operation. It all kicks off back in the 1920s when one Italian immigrant named Charles Ponzi moved to the United States. He arrived to the States with the same goal as anyone, to work. That's it, just to work and be successful. At first he didn't have much luck, but eventually Charles was hired at Bank Zerosi, and when the bank sadly went bankrupt, Ponzi was SOL. He needed to do something, and he needed to do something fast. So he dabbled into smuggling, but he got caught. After he was released, he went into the postal system, started to buy large quantities of postal coupons from countries with, a weak economy, and then he hired a bunch of agents, trained them up good, Wolf of Wall Street style, and the whole idea was that you would promise investors that they would receive double their investment back in return within 45 days. How lovely is that? Thus, the Ponzi scheme is born. Yeah, these agents got 10% commission too, which, as far as scams go, it's not too shabby, not bad at all.
Number 1, Black Tuesday. Uh-oh, stinky! The market crashed and now everyone's going broke. Big oof, right? Adam told me to say that. Anyway, yes, the great market crash of 29. It wasn't good. A mixture of outstanding loans, an already declining unemployment percentage, a struggling agriculture sector mixed in with a speck of low wages and stocks just not being worth what they were, is the cause of the crash. By 1932, a lot of stocks were only worth 20% of what they originally were before. The stock market crash was not the main cause of the Great Depression, however, it was a symptom of it. The market wouldn't fully be back to normal until after FDR's New Deal, or realistically, when World War II had started and kicked America's, and really the world's economy back into turbo mode.
Kicking off the list at number 10, the disappearance of the Norse. I just watched The Northman and that was a great time. Highly recommend. Fantastic movie. I'm gonna start barking at dogs just like he did. That's how I'm gonna do it now. Norse mythology is fascinating yet of course mysterious. They settled in Greenland for over 400 years and they left quite the mark, I'd say, or maybe not as much as we'd think. We look at Norse history as violent and bearded and mighty, but Vikings, they were nice, okay? They invented hockey, they skied, women had a large amount of rights compared to what we often see on this channel, and even today in general. But one of life's greatest mysteries are where Greenland's Vikings went. They seemingly disappeared. The only remains are crumbling church walls that were used for barely 500 years. That's nothing. Archaeologists are still unsure what happened to the Norse population. Maybe it was a plague, maybe it was the Inuit, or perhaps they settled back in Europe. It's really hard to tell. Recent excavations provide hints that they settled in the West, most likely relying on trade to survive. So maybe they just followed the goods. But again, life's greatest mysteries. We have no idea. Number 9, Shroud of Turin. I can't believe it's taken me 4 parts to mention this. Let's go. This legendary cloth is dated back to the late 1200s, early 1300s, you know, that old time. This holy cloth appears to show the image of a man, presumably one J. Christ. It's 4 meters long and 1 meter wide, and it sits permanently in the Cathedral of Turin in northern Italy. So if you're in the area, go take a peek at what many believe to be the burial shroud in which Jesus was wrapped in, you know, after his crucifixion. Sometimes I wake up and I see the outline of my own face in the pillowcase and I think, is that Jesus? Who is this handsome chap right here? Covered in drool. So much drool. Number 8, Keel Hauling. Not to be confused with Kegels, although that also takes a great amount of work. Keel hauling was reserved for the worst of the worst at sea. Yeah, this is some high seas punishments. Here we go. This was used by pirates for sailors who disobeyed orders and whatnot. The victim would be suspended by a rope with rocks or weights around their ankles, and then they'd be lowered to the keel of the ship where, you know, all the ship barnacles and nasty stuff live. And then they would get dragged all around those, plus water pain and drowning. It's a lot. It's a deadly combination. Anything to do with barnacles or the sea, zero chance. I'm not messing with either of those. I'll tell you anything, Blackbeard, literally anything. Number 7, water punishments. Since we're on the topic, let's dive in a bit more. Pun intended. Taking a step away from the worst physical thing that one could possibly go through, let's look at how far the mind will go before it too breaks. Sensory deprivation, it's still around in today. In fact, there's many who pay for it, believe it or not. Yeah, a fun experience today is paying to lay in a dark tub full of salt and water and then floating. It's a magical experience, some would say. It's magical because your senses are powerful, especially combined with water. So the dripping machine, the water punishment, anything around that is just all bad, especially in medieval times. Ice cold water dripping on your forehead over and over and over for hours and hours. It's one of the worst and oldest punishments. Everybody's heard about this in some way, shape, or form. In medieval times, they would do it as well. The drops would be at different times too, so you couldn't predict it. You can't see right now, but my toes are wiggling. They're wiggling around in my Birkenstocks. In medieval times, they would tie you down and then using a horn, this big funnel, they would pour 9 pints of water in your mouth sometimes, yeah. Pain was a form of punishment. This was the normal at one point. I feel sick. I feel so sick. They would do that with wine sometimes too. They'd make people, jesters, chug wine. That was in Game of Thrones one episode. Number 6, the breaking wheel. Okay, this one isn't even creative. This is just bad and like just humans at their worst. The breaking wheel is literally just a large disc, a pirate ship wheel almost, where somebody is tied to it and then everyone else just hammers them over and over. They just beat the shit out of them. But of course, since we're talking about medieval times, everything has to be a show. It has to be, some guy's always doing this in medieval times when it's like a guy being punished horribly. He's like, haha, it's so stupid. So once the accused was beaten and then presumed dead, the wheel would lift up and then turn, you know, to show everybody what's up, what happens if you steal a loaf of bread, I guess. The other way is they would tie a person to the wheel and then continue to rotate it. All the while the ropes would get tighter and tighter around your body. Yeah, it's kind of like the rack, but with a twist. Pun intended. Number 5, Able and Baker. Okay, we often remember Laika the space dog and her 103-minute cosmic journey aboard Sputnik 2. But does anybody remember Able and Baker? Why don't we talk about these two enough? This was the American version of Laika. This was less than 2 years right after that. It was May 28th, 1959. The United States launched 2 female primates. They launched Able and Baker into space. This mission only lasted 15 minutes and they both safely returned back home. That's wild to me. The monkeys weren't injured from the cosmic commute at all. A radio message came in shortly right after they splashed down in the Atlantic, and the message said, no injuries or other difficulties. Thank the Lord, we love that. Able and Baker, perfect, as they said. I don't think we can blast any more primates into space going 10,000 miles an hour anymore, but it's wild to me that we did this ever. This is insane. A human had to strap in a chimp into a rocket ship and be like, all right, see ya. And then, that's insane. Grown adults had to do that. That's insane. Able sadly passed away shortly after the flight. Nothing to do with the actual flight itself, just timing. Meanwhile, Baker, she got famous. She was getting 150 fan letters a day. Imagine if she had Twitter. Oh, be wild. These ladies are icons. Never mind Laika, okay? Hit that thumbs up for Abel and then subscribe for Baker. They went in space. That's crazy. Number 4, asteroid redirection. Speaking of space, this one has Michael Bay written all over it. I can't wait. I'm pretty excited for this project. I can't even catch a baseball with my hands. You're telling me NASA is gonna catch an asteroid hurling through space? This is the future. We've arrived. NASA landing on an asteroid is one thing. Sure, that's, you know, a Michael Bay movie. But their asteroid redirection mission, that's a whole nother level. This coming Monday, as in like 4 days from now, I don't know, NASA is gonna broadcast its first attempt to modify the orbit of an asteroid, hurling through space. This is real life. And before you start to panic, no, there's no way any debris can hit the Earth after said test. But if an asteroid was coming for Earth, well, now we have a backup plan to hopefully, ideally, save the human race and the planet. That would be helpful. That's always handy. The planetary defense team is using a craft called DART, just sending a dart out there. You got a dart? Awesome. Double asteroid redirection test, DART, which will ideally target the asteroid Dimorphos and then altering its orbit. And we can tune in live to watch the whole thing on Monday, because that's where we're at in the future. We can just tune in live and watch Jake Paul fight someone or watch an asteroid get blasted off of its course. How are you spending your afternoon this Monday? Number 3, mass extinctions. Are we part of the 6th extinction? I mean, we're talking about asteroids getting blasted away from Earth. It kind of feels like it. It kind of feels like something's nearing us. It's happening right now, isn't it? We lose thousands of species every year, and when looking in the past, sure, asteroids and ice ages, they've all caused these massive extinction level events, of course. But after humans invented the wheel and discovered fire and, you know, became the worst things ever to exist, things started to change naturally. In the 1800s, industrialization drove up extinction rates and continues to do so, obviously. We're not helping the planet by any means. And according to Elizabeth Colbert, across the world, scientists every day are monitoring what could be the largest extinction event since the dinosaurs. Right now. It's happening right now. The way human beings interact with the environment and affect biodiversity, it could be more deadly than an asteroid hitting the Earth. That's a fun, scary fact. Okay. With an ever-climbing list of endangered species, Colbert and the world ask the question, is it too late to change it? Kind of feels like it's too late. Okay, let's move on to something a little more lighter so we don't feel like complete trash. Deal? Yep. Number 2, relaxative. Okay, so right off the bat, the Victorian era was a little messy. I'm sure you've figured this out by now, but these messy illnesses were putting a lot of pressure on medical practitioners back in the Victorian day, so they were desperate for new treatments. Sometimes I laugh at Victorian medical treatments, but they tried. And they also achieved many medical breakthroughs, one that I saved for number 1. But when it came to handling chickenpox in the Victorian era, that wasn't our finest hour. No, we didn't figure that one out, I don't think, right off the bat. Chickenpox in the Victorian era was being treated by using laxatives. Yeah, just let that sink in for a second. I have chickenpox. What should I do, doc? Just go take a shit. Or 6, I don't know, might help. Yeah, folks would slam some castor oil and then, ready for this? They would get even more sick. Yeah, who would have thought, right? You thought you were uncomfortable before. Well, not even close. Not every answer was a solution in the Victorian era. But this one was. And finally, number 1, the discovery of penicillin. Thank God this one happened. We'll still talk about this one because it's a really good one. Sometimes miracles happen when nobody is in the room or no one's looking. That's ideally the best time. Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin back in 1928. Now at the time, he was actually studying Staphylococcus, which is bacteria that causes infections and boils and all that nasty stuff. But right before Alexander left for a well-earned 2-week vacation, he left a petri dish with some of that Staphylococcus right there on the table, just sitting there. Rather than, stored away in an incubator, he just accidentally left it out. Now during this time off, a penicillium mold, the spore just drifted in there, either through a window or up the lab stairwell, some Horton Hears a Who type commute. It drifted in there, and the temperatures of the room and the lack of one Alexander Fleming allowed for the mold to fight back. And then miracles literally happened. It then prevented that bacteria from growing anymore. So he returned and discovered this antibacterial substance was only produced by strains of penicillium. So now we have a solution that isn't a laxative. You know what I mean? Now we have some things that help us out medicinally. Yeah, we got asteroids, some medicines, some horrible history, some dark tragic events. We got it all on this list, really. I don't know how to tell you that.
Number 10, the dust. In the year 536, apparently a large cloud of dust and or fog covered up the sun for 18 months in Europe. Naturally, back then, there could have been 1,000 reasons why this could happen, or at least that's what people thought. A quote from the wise Procopius describes the event. as follows. For the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon during this whole year, and it seemed exceedingly like the sun in eclipse, for the beams it shed were not clear, nor as it is accustomed to shed. And from the time when this thing happened to men, were free, neither from war nor pestilence, nor any other thing leading to death. Ooh, wow, that sounds bad. Was bad. Our best guess is that there was a lot of volcanic activity at the time, and it could have covered parts of Europe, which is so awful, I can't even, and you'll see why. Number 9, famine. So related to the last point, in a time in history where there's no industrial agricultural sector, greenhouses, and those grow lights that you're totally not growing the devil's lettuce with in your basement. Yep, that's right, I know about it. Nice try, I know. Growing food can be difficult. Weather, pests, disease, harvesting a full crop is both rewarding and difficult. Well, since the dust cloud had blocked out the sun for 18 months, that meant the crops were not reaching their full fruiting potential. This cloud of dust again most likely came from volcanic eruptions and is speculated to have even dropped the temperature a few degrees. God, that sounds awful. Number 8, the plague. Man, this is really shaping up to be the worst year ever. We thought 2020 was bad. Also in the year 536, there was a terrible plague, known as the Justinian plague, or really, it's the Black Plague, but it's first round of it. As if having the sky filled with smoke and no food wasn't worse enough, people were dropping left, right, and center. Literally, they couldn't keep up with the body count, apparently reaching thousands within days. That's bad. You don't like, that's not good. You don't want that. There were so many bodies that it began to stink up Constantinople. The bodies were thrown into the sea, but they kept resurfacing, which, God, that's so gross. I can't even, I'm gonna be sick. So Emperor Justinian ordered the bodies removed from the city, which oftentimes led to the body carriers themselves succumbing to the disease. Too bad they're years away from some Purell and a mask. You know, just some good old something to sanitize the hands with, you know? Jeez. Number 7, winter. Canada. Winter, snow. For about 7 to 8 months out of the year in this country, it is cold, snowy, and cold weather. Right, Chris? Oh, yeah. Mind you, we do get nice summers here, it's just a little bit of a trade-off. So when it snows here, even in May, it's not that much of a surprise. However, when it does snow in places like Texas, we tend to take notice. This was the case in 536 China and in places in Mesopotamia, where during the summer months, there were reports of snow, which is really bad, especially if you're trying to grow food. I mean, there's no snow shovels, no plows, and no Timmies. Canadians, how would we even function without a double-double on a cold and miserable morning? All Canuck jokes aside, it was quite devastating to the regions and just adds more to what really must be the worst year ever. Number 6. Time to get oot. I am many things. Canadian, moderately funny, and a second-rate John Candy or Chris Farley. I love them both, but it depends where you're from. If you're Canadian, it's John Candy. If you're American, it's probably Chris Farley. What I'm not is a quitter. I'm a soldier, a fighter, a trooper, and I hustle my bustle, partner. I'm not shy to turn away from a challenge, and I strive to figure it out. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not afraid to throw in the towel. Sometimes you gotta know when to pull back, reassess, and most importantly, come back. If you come back, you never really quit, did you? If you come back, you're good. Take for an example some towns in central and eastern Sweden during 536 who abandoned their towns. No one is really sure why, but these towns were abandoned, obviously. Not that it's easy to run a town, because trust me, I play city builders, I would know, but it's speculated that already cool temperatures could have been made worse by the volcanic ash that covered the sky. Ooh, yeah, you wouldn't want cold temperatures getting worse back then. Bad for you.
Number 5 is gold and bling. Modern estimation says that South African gold mining was that of an epic scale. An estimated amount of gold ore mined from the entire region by the ancients exceeds 43 million tons. The ore yielded nearly 700 tons of pure gold, which today would be valued over $7.5 billion. Meanwhile, in West African gold mining, it's estimated 1,500 to 3,500 tons, worth more than 30 billion in today's market. So it comes as no surprise the African population used it like crazy. In 1324 AD, Malalian ruler Mansa Musa brought so much money with him to Egypt, his visit resulted in the collapse of gold prices, and it took 12 years for their economy to bounce back. A 16th century traveler visited Central African civilization of Kanam-Borno and commented that the emperor's cavalry had golden stirrups, spurs, bits, and buckles. Even the ruler's dogs had chains of the finest gold. In 1067 AD, the emperor of Ghana was said to have an almost identical setup, including a golden temple room. A Portuguese chronicler of 1600 AD Africa described the country's peoples as finely clad in many rich garments of gold, silk, and cotton, and the women with much gold and silver chains and bracelets, which they wear on their legs, stomachs, and arms, and many jeweled earrings in their ears. Even the famous palace of Mount Fura is known for having gold chandeliers, outlines furniture, rafters, beams, decor pieces, and cutlery also made of gold. It's easy to say that gold has a high cultural significance to the people of Africa's past and present, so always be conscious, do your research, and don't appropriate. Let's talk the Lost Knocks, number 4 on the countdown. Tongue twister. The Knocks are one of the most mysterious of ancient African civilizations. Located in what's now central Nigeria, the first evidence of their existence was actually an accidental discovery during a mining operation. The initial discovery kind of fell flat for some reason, but when a further trove of artifacts was unburied in 1928, archaeologists finally came rolling in. All we knew was that A, they were super ancient, and B, they made a ton of terracotta heads. Like a lot. They're currently using these terracotta heads to date the time of the Knocks' existence, which is constantly being revised to be older and older and older. Currently, the assumption is the Knock culture may have been early 1500 BCE, being one of the earliest, if not the earliest, civilization in sub-Sahara Africa. Wow. Knock developed smelting techniques which gave them iron tools much earlier than their neighbors that date back to 500 BCE. This technology leap meant that the Knocks skipped over the Bronze Age entirely, going from stone to iron. Incredible. Knock artifacts are spread over 50,000 square kilometers, inspiring archaeologists to believe in a potential mass Knock city sitting somewhere beneath or around, waiting to be discovered. Unfortunately, the reason we haven't yet is Knocks used mud and wood to build their empire, something that the climatic conditions of Nigeria easily broke down over hundreds of years. Number 3 showcases the power and resilience of African women, the Igbo Women's Uprise. The colonists' first mistake was in taking power of Africa. Their second was in undermining it. The Igbo history, it's remembered as the Women's War, a massive revolt against the policies imposed by colonial British controlling Nigeria. In 1914, colonial governors implemented an indirect control and ruling system. Under his plan, they ruled locals using warrant chiefs, who were traditionally the pre-existing Igbo chiefs. It became downright oppressive. Property was being stolen, draconian regulations implemented, go look up what I mean, and the imprisonment of those who spoke out against it. It was hard not to be mad at the warrant chiefs, but they were just the messenger. So what blew it out of the water was the colonialists imposed a special tax on the Igbo market women, people responsible for supplying food to the growing urban populations in varying Nigerian cities. Obviously, the population feared the taxes would drive many of the market women out of business and seriously disrupt the supply of food and non-perishable goods available to the populace. So November 1929, thousands of Igbo women congregate and protest warrant chief theft and tax at administration centers. They used a fun tradition dubbed sitting on a man, which is to censor men. They did this via all-night song and dance ridicules. These icons also attacked colonial stores and banks, broke into prisons to release prisoners, and attacked the colonial monuments by burning them down. This 2-month siege had a reported 25,000 Igbo women participants, and in the end, the Igbo women's action forced colonial authorities to drop their plans to impose a tax on the market women and curb the power of warrant chiefs. The women's uprising is seen as the first major challenge to British authority in Nigeria and West Africa during the colonial period, and became a historical example of feminism and anti-colonial protest. Number 2 is another story of incredible perseverance, the Little George. You're quick to be taught in school about all the ships that made it to America with captured Africans and all the ones that sank with them. How about a story where the colonists were tossed overboard instead? Well, it happened once with the Little George in June 1730. This little-known revolt was one of the most successful on-sea uprisings of captured Africans in high sea history. It was 5 days into the voyage from the coast of Guinea to what's now Rhode Island, USA. There was a documented 96 captured people aboard and held below in the poor ventilation, chained and piled amongst each other. Several of the captured men and women below began working tirelessly to free their wrists of shackles, unaccepting of this reality, so that on June 6th at 4 a.m., the captives were able to burst through the bulkhead of the ship. Unarmed, exhausted, dehydrated, it must have been adrenaline and the ancestors who aided them as they decimated the 3 watchmen who tried to alert the other crew. Using a homemade contraption of gunpowder in a glass bottle, other captives threatened to ignite it, something the rest of the crew would realize would blow a hole big enough to sink the ship. So the crew all surrendered. They doubted the Africans would be able, with no sailing or navigation experience, to use the ship and get back home, and ultimately give up to them. No! These guys knew celestial mapping. They turned the ship around and sailed it back to the African continent, surviving off of the rations meant for the crew. It was their turn to starve anyway. After a few days, the Little George reached the mouth of Sierra Leone River, where the Africans and British crew abandoned the ship, leaving the Captain George Scott aboard. Number 1 is origin of man. You're hearing it here first, maybe, but the human race is of African origin. Now, it's important to divide the line. I am not referring to Neanderthals, but rather the subset of human that followed and is what we are now. Referred to as Homo sapiens sapien, remains found in Omo, Ethiopia are the oldest in the world, dating back to 230,000+ years old, and no older ones have yet to be found. They're titled Omo 1. The remains, they were originally thought to be from a later time period, using endless DNA testing and also the layering of volcanic ash, as well as debris over the remains through different periods, it helped us determine a much older age just last year in 2022. A New York Times article published in March of 1979 documented this discovery on the front page when it first happened, under the title Nubian Monarchy Called the Oldest. As curious readers leafed through, they were able to learn that evidence of the oldest recognizable monarchy in human history, preceding the rise of the earliest Egyptian kings by several generations, has been discovered in artifacts from ancient Nubia. This area is now the territory of northern Sudan and southern modern-day Egypt. This isn't a new theory or fact, however, as it's been long thought that we began in a single East or South African region, which eventually spread into Asia and then into Europe. But it is one left out of a lot of textbooks in school.
Starting our list off at number 10, Lake Nyos. We love talking about Pompeii. We can't get enough of it. I'm fascinated. They have a restaurant that's back and open now in Pompeii. It's crazy. Now that's quite the eruption. Historically, that's a bad one. That's pretty scary. But a recent eruption in 1986, well, we don't talk about this one enough. First of all, a limnic eruption is a rare event, so you can sleep not in fear tonight. It occurs when CO2 dissolved in deep water lakes suddenly erupts. Cause yeah, that can happen. Who knew that? That's why I don't like lakes. There you go, right there. These events have only been observed twice, the deadliest being Lake Nyos in 1986. When a limnic eruption occurs, large clouds of CO2 form, which then all of a sudden descend and drop below the oxygen in the air, causing all living things in the vicinity to choke and not survive anymore. In this case, the cloud fell on nearby villages, ultimately causing the deaths of 1,700 people and 3,500 livestock. Number 9, the Spanish flu of 1918. The Spanish flu of 1918. Okay, yeah, this one's probably pretty good. Since we know a little something about plagues now in real life and toilet paper and stress, let's turn the clocks back 95 years when the Spanish flu entered the game. What was it like back then? The Spanish flu, if you didn't know, it was a strain of the H1N1 virus, which we all know as well. And when it hit, it took 50 to 100 million people. Very fast. 4% of the world's population gone. Now, it was recent and it was quite horrible. We couldn't stay home and watch Ozark for that one, so instead, the Spanish flu is said to have spread so violently because of soldiers being in close quarters during World War I. Yeah, again, very different than our plague. Immune systems were shot as is, and you're telling me a plague rolled through while we're in trenches? No way, what a nightmare. But just like that, the virus disappeared. Better treatment, perhaps it mutated into a much weaker strain. Either way, great, stay gone. Get out of here. Go away and stay there, pal. Hit that thumbs up for the Spanish flu not being around. Awesome, we love that. It's a good one to not have. Number 8, the Great Dying. This name's pretty accurate if I'm being honest myself. Scariest environment imaginable. Here we go. Turning the clocks and solar system back 252 million years ago, the Permian Triassic extinction, which for convenience sake we'll call the Great Dying, was and hopefully shall remain the largest extinction event on Earth. The fact that we're even alive right now, watching this video, clicking that thumbs up and subscribing, well, it's all pretty rare, all things considered. This was a butterfly effect triggered by a massive volcanic eruption around the Serbian Traps in Russia. A runaway greenhouse effect was responsible for the loss of 95% of all marine life and 70% of all land animals. So everything, pretty much everything's gone. Temperatures rose as the sea began to absorb large quantities of CO2 from the atmosphere. Mentioned that a little earlier, and that could not be great. And it began turning into carbonic acid, hence all that marine life that didn't make it. Methane hydrate then started to bubble from the ocean surface, which is horrifying to imagine, and it raised the temperature even higher at that point. Now, imagine if this didn't happen. We'd have those scary sharks still swimming around. We're remnants of the surviving 4% of the Great Dying. Yeah, tell all your friends that. I'm gonna add that to my LinkedIn. That sounds not half bad. Yeah, I survived the Great Dying, so yeah. Really good at scooping ice cream. Let's do it. Number 7, Maximilien Robespierre. On July 27, 1794, French revolutionary Maximilien Robespierre and 21 of his followers were all arrested at the Hotel de Ville in Paris. Now, considering that this was 1794 and we got arrested, what follows is sure to be a public nightmare. The next day, Robespierre and again 21 of his followers were all taken to the Place de Revolution, where they were all executed by guillotine before a cheering crowd. Always a cheering crowd, of course. What else are we doing today? Let's go watch. What history tends to leave out of this part is that Maximilian attempted to take his own life beforehand because he knew his fate was gonna suck with the whole thing. But when he tried to take his own life, he survived and was left instead with a nasty jaw wound. So in Game of Thrones fashion, the executioner, when the time came, ripped the jaw bandage off first, and then he saw the guillotine. Yeah, again, to a cheering crowd, remember? They all watched all of this unfold. I can't even watch UFC sometimes. You're telling me people watch this? IRL? I'm gonna go throw up real quick. Be right back. Number 6, the eruption. Mount Pinatubo, which is located in the Philippines, was another volcanic eruption that shook up history. A little more recent than the other one. This was on June 15th, 1991. Mount Pinatubo, this massive volcano, erupted into what would be the second largest volcanic eruption of the 20th century. Impressive? Yes. Terrifying? Absolutely. Yep, this is very loud and scary. Activity in the volcano first started on April 2nd, 1991, and these things take a little time to, finish up. So that same year, researchers set up seismographs in the area, and by June, the volcano was having a group of progressively shallower eruptions. And then on June 12th, the volcano had its first spectacular eruption, which sent hot ash 19 kilometers up into the atmosphere, which then rained on down to everything around it, which is the worst thing I can imagine. Additional smaller eruptions continued on June 13th, which then led to some intense seismic activity. And then on June 15th, the volcano once again went off, this time sending a cloud of ash 40 kilometers into the atmosphere. So bye-bye sun for a little bit. This one's gonna linger.
Number 5, Holder. Okay, picture this. You're walking through a forest in Norse mythology. Nice. Doing as you do. Boy, what a nice forest this is, you say to yourself. I sure am grateful for the tree of life and Odin and all that stuff I have because of the such nice things because I pray to them. Don't hurt me. When all of a sudden you spot a lady in the woods and hubba, she's gorgeous. She lures you in. She thinks you're handsome and doesn't care about your receding hairline, beer belly, and the big toenail that you should have got checked by a doctor months ago. I'm calling a lot of people out there. She wants you to marry her. Sounds too good to be true, right? Guys, come on, you know what I'm talking about. But you gotta be careful though, guys. You gotta be careful. Because if you saw her cow's tail before you married her, she keeps it. Or so the story goes. So yeah, they were ladies in the forest with cow tails. You had to marry them, and if you saw their tails before you were married, she'd have it for the rest of life. Makes sense. Sure. Number 4, elves. Elves. Everyone loves elves, especially that movie Elf. Everyone loves that one. It's like it became an instant Christmas classic. Crazy. The population of elves seems to significantly increase when there's a fan expo in town. Go figure. Elves in Norse mythology represent a small divine figure, similar to the dwarves. They are creators of valuables and smithers, and had their strong place in mythology. And for some reason, when the elves were no longer needed in the land of Vikings and Mead, they went to go work for a fat man in a red coat in the North Pole. And before you even ask, yes, even Father Christmas has his roots in Norse mythology. And yes, before you ask, I know him personally, and I will be telling him who's naughty and nice this year. Christmas might be far away, but I'm watching. Ooh, we're watching. Don't you worry, me and Santa Claus. Ooh. Number 3, Kraken. This one actually surprised me. I didn't know this. I wasn't expecting this to be Norse. But yeah, the Kraken. In a nutshell, the Kraken is a huge octopus or squid-like creature that preys on the poor and doomed sailors who dare cross its path. Now, I'm sure a lot of you fear the deep water because, well, you can't see the bottom of it, and I think that's a rational fear. The reason for that, of course, is because you don't know what's big chillin' at the bottom of that water. The answer? It's the Kraken. That's horrifying. Using its large tentacles, it wraps itself around ships and brings them down to Davy Jones' locker. Or at least that's what happened in Pirates of the Caribbean. That's how I get my knowledge. In some Norse tales, the Kraken is as big as an island. Yeah, if you see an octopus just as big as an island, just turn the boat around at that point. There ain't nothing on the boat that's gonna deal with that business. Just turn it around. Turn the boat around. We're out of here. We're leaving. Just walk it off. Number 2, Droger. Okay, let me paint a picture for you. It's a late summer night in 2011. You're a couple inches too deep into your favorite couch. A calming music plays as you traverse the lands of Skyrim. You come across a door and begin to explore. What untold riches you will find in this dungeon, except the first thing to greet you is an undead creature with pale gray flesh and eyes that glow blue like the sea. It charges you with a sword and gives off a grunt that sounds like your dad choking at an all-you-can-eat buffet. You slay the beast and try to read its name. Droger's no vowel there, Droger. You've unlocked a new ability. Dyslexia. Okay, so maybe that was my story, but the Drogers are the focus here. Skyrim is heavily influenced by Norse mythology. Droger is one of those things. They were undead creatures that would protect the tombs and graves from looters, as a lot of the warriors at the time were buried with such valuables. And yes, when I go into dungeons, I tip over everything. The pots, the wall, I check everything, gotta check everything. Number 1, Valkyries. Oh yes, the beautiful Valkyries. For such a gorgeous image, they have a rather grim job. Whenever someone falls in battle, it's up to these ladies to guide them to the afterlife. In a way, they're kind of like battle angels. It literally translates to chooser of the slain. I hope you folks have been praying towards Odin, otherwise you won't be able to make it to Valhalla, which is bad, because that's where all the good little Viking men and women go. You want to go there so they can be with their ancestors and eat and drink meat all day, and you want that. I know you do.
Number 10, the Spanish Inquisition. Ah, yes. The Spanish Inquisition, the process of combating heresy, or as I like to call it, people not agreeing with you. See, when someone doesn't agree with me, I'll try my best to convince them otherwise. Or I'll just, I don't know, carry on living my life, because what they believe is not my business. But not in Spain from 1478 to 1834, no sir. Here we have a guy called the Grand Inquisitor, who was the head of the Inquisition in Spain. He was empowered by the Vatican to deal with heretics, however he deemed worthy, which seemed to be fire, because there were over 2,000 burning at the stakes. More than 160,000 Jews were expelled from Spain, and those who remained, along with a heck of a lot of Muslims, were forced to convert. I could go on about how bad it was, but I got 9 other points to write here. Number 9, Ottomans stole my baby. How do you create a loyal army when a bunch of your subjects don't really trust or like you very much? You go the old First Order in the new Star Wars trilogy route, and you steal children and brainwash them. Duh. If you were a Christian family living in the Ottoman-controlled Balkans, Anatolia, or the Caucasus, you had to pay the blood tax. That means every 4 or 5 years, your Ottoman overlords would come along and take a male child under the age of 2 to be converted to Islam, and then educated as soldiers to serve in the Janissary. But hey, to make up for your forced brainwashing and enrollment in a military, you were paid, and you did get preferential treatment because, I mean, you don't even remember being not an Ottoman. Kinda messed up that you were used to fight against the same Christians who brought you into this world though. Number 8. Ottomans need to chill. The Ottomans were kind of the worst. Now, yes, that point of view was bolstered by the Christian parts of the world, so we can imagine they were a little biased. But when you're known for slaughtering humans to get things done, then yeah, you aren't going to be the first person invited to family dinner, you know? 2 great examples of Ottomans just going that extra mile would be in 1480 when they de-lifed the city of Otranto in Italy for not converting to Islam, and in 1571 when they took the city of Famagusta and made sure every Christian who lived there didn't see the following day. The Ottoman commander did some lovely things to the Venetian commander. He said, "Got your nose," and ears, gave him an unwanted ride around the city and presented him as a trophy to his sultan. This definitely provoked some Christian clapbacks though. Just take a look at the guy called Vlad the Impaler. Number 7, Christians need to chill too. Oh, did you think the Ottomans were the only ones out here committing atrocities? Surprise, welcome to the real world, kiddo. European Christian rulers were not any better. You see, back in the day, many rulers decided to employ mercenaries such as the condottieri in Italy and the Landsknecht in Germany to fight their private wars for them. These mercenaries were here for one reason: money. And as such, did not go the normal warfare routes. Instead of attacking fortified positions, the condottieri would go around the countryside burning and looting. They would even bite the hand that feeds, like in 1527 when 14,000 Landsknecht sacked Rome after they were not paid. The Christian mercenaries were interested in one thing: cold hard cash, and no one was safe if they didn't get it. The Landsknecht were even said to not be allowed into hell for what they did in Rome. Number 6. The church is corrupt? No way! The church has always been political. But in the Renaissance, it became publicly political and corrupt. There were two main families whose members became the Pope, the Medici and the Borgia, and neither one of them was too great or even followed the rules of the church. Pope Alexander Borgia VI, for example, had 4 children with a mistress that he continued to see while he was the Pope. One of his sons became the Archbishop of Valencia at age 17. Which you won't be surprised to know is not the norm. On the Medici side of things, we have Pope Leo X, who was accused of taking part in sins like masquerade balls, selling salvation, nepotism, and excessive spending. The corruption got cleaned, but it took quite the event for that to happen.
Number 5. The Great Fire of London. Back in the 1600s, London saw quite the blaze. The Great Fire of 1666. Now, in the Bible, it references the number 666 as the number of the beast, living, in the depths below and all that good stuff. So many Christians in Europe back in the 1600s believed that the world was going to end in 1666, kind of like our version of the Mayan calendar debacle back in 2012. Well, the thing is, the Great Fire actually did happen that year. Yeah, it happened September 2nd to September 5th. The blaze destroyed the entire city, including 87 churches and 13,000 homes. See, many saw this, of course, as said prophecy to the end of the world coming true, but with all the property damage, the death toll for this great fire was relatively low, as only 10 people died. That's less than half the lives lost in the Salem witch trials, so could be worse. Not great, but surprisingly low for what you would think, looking at this. Number 4, Greek fire. More fire facts coming in hot. Puns. A lot of puns today. A blazing mystery, this one is. Okay, Greek fire had scholars and pyromaniacs stumped for decades. This powerful incendiary weapon was used during the 7th century. The Byzantine Empire was on the top of their game with this one. Imagine being the first human to weaponize fire. How terrifying is that? That's horrible. It's been referred to as Roman fire or sticky fire. Many resources suggest that water made this situation worse. The Greek fire was only enhanced with water. That was the magic back then. The trick here was using combustible substances like sulfur, petroleum, all that bad stuff. They would blast it from a safe distance to other ships. The only way to put out Greek fire was copious amounts of sand, vinegar, and urine. Yeah, the third one? No problem, we got lots of that on board. Especially when a Greek fire syringe is facing your ship. Yeah, lots of urine on standby. Just say the word. I'm shaking with fear. Number 3, Viking funerals. Now I know this isn't really messed up, but I really wish we still did these today. This would be a spectacle. Vikings would do funerals in one of 2 ways. Both were pretty epic to witness back in the day. One, they would bury the body, the classic. They would leave stone circles around the shallow graves that they dug, or they would do burial mounds or grave fields, usually after a large battle. Vikings were pagan, so they believed that the more smoke during a cremation, the better. That was their way of reaching the afterlife. Again, beautiful, ceremonic, it's not a word. Boats also symbolize safe passage to said afterlife in Norse mythology, so Vikings would shape these stones around the grave like a ship, or these mounds would be shaped like a boat of some sorts. How beautiful is that? But high-ranking Norsemen, they would be buried with their boats. In 834 AD, the Oseberg ship burial honored 2 women. This ship vessel was 70 feet long and 17 feet wide. There's 15 oars on each side. It was quite the spectacle. It was discovered in Norway on a farm. So the whole shooting an arrow while they're at sea thing, yeah, it wasn't as common as we believe. Because if you missed, you just gave away the Oseberg. And you botched a funeral at the same time. Way to go. So more often than not, they would do these ceremonies on land with the arrow and the fire. Which is good news for me, because I have terrible aim. If I was alive back then, I would have missed every time. Number 2, not so great flood. This one is most likely how we'll meet our collective demise. I'm gonna call that. Back in the 1500s, German mathematician and astrologer Johann Stoffler predicted that a great flood would cover the world and result, of course, in the death of humanity as we know it. Haha, great. He even pinpointed a date. How specific is that? We love warnings. We love heads up here. The date was apparently February 25th, 1524. This was when all the planets would be aligned under Pisces, a water sign, so naturally they thought there would be a large flood. I see the connection, I get it, I'm not totally off board here. Soon after he made said prediction, hundreds of pamphlets were spread around warning of this great flood, and as you can imagine, this caused a lot of panic. A German nobleman believed this, maybe a bit too much, so he gathered all of his resources to build a 3-story ark. Yeah, he went full on Noah for this doomsday prediction. The guy had a 3-story ark built. The amount of effort in that, come on. In the end though, thankfully, when the day of February 25th, 1524 arrived, it did rain, but it was a light one at most, so there's no flooding going on here. Not yet, at least. And finally, number 1, the green-skinned children. This legend comes from the village of Woolpit in Suffolk, England. The story goes that in the 12th century, 2 children, a brother and a sister, just suddenly appeared in the village, out of nowhere. And as their name suggests, they had green skin. Not blue, they weren't avatars. I checked twice. So obviously my first thought is aliens, for sure. When the children were first found, they were acting kind of sketchy, they seemed nervous, and were seemingly speaking gibberish. To be fair, they were discovered near a wolf pit, so that could explain the nervousness, right? But also, and most importantly, they were green. We're gonna focus on that one today. After they were found, they were taken back to the home of Sir Richard Duchesne, where he of course offered them food, water, and shelter, all that good stuff. But they were all set. Yeah, and apparently they refused to eat. What's going on here? The only thing they decided to eat over the next few days were green beans that they consumed straight out of the ground. Yeah, raw, there we go. A couple of green beans, eating green beans. What a sight. As the children lived with Richard over the following years, he taught them how to speak, and once they had the English tongue down, they told Richard that they're actually inhabitants of the land St. Martin, who is regarded with peculiar veneration in the country which gave us birth. And that they only vaguely remember what happened before they arrived on our planet. So yeah, they're from another planet, and not a lot makes sense here. They're with their father hearing the St. Edmund's bell chiming, and then all of a sudden they were just teleported to this field in England. So parallel universes, I guess they're real too. Who knew? That's what you get on a part 4.
Number 10, liquid stockings. When most people think of war, they think of side A versus side B. Man with gun shoot other man with gun. Simple, right? To most, yes, but the war departments and those behind the scenes know that the war is a logistical nightmare, seriously. A lot of things on this list are because we needed to find alternatives. Millions of resources were pooled together to defeat the tyranny of fascism in World War II. Besides guns and ammunition, obviously, literally everything else is needed. Rubber, cloth, fabric, food, water, oil, grease, medicine, gas, men, and all kinds of metals. One of the things that was needed for the war effort was nylon, the same thing your grandma used for her stockings. So in Britain, when there was a shortage, the ladies did the next best thing and used a liquid to paint on their stockings. A classic example of keeping calm and carrying on. Way to go, ladies. Should be a bad idea though. If I started sweating on those, I'd have paint everywhere. It wouldn't be good, dude. It would not be good. Number 9, food rations. I know, but listen. You just aren't you when you're hungry. Nobody can tell me that they feel pretty on an empty stomach. Am I right? Maybe less bloated, but still, you're not your best. Sadly for people living at home during the war, food rationing was quite common. Meats, grains, dairy, pretty much everything was needed to feed the troops. My grandparents always tell this story of them growing up during the war, and that they would trade in tins of grease collected at home for free entry into the movie theater, which kind of makes sense. Which if you ask someone from that time is a big deal. The grease had multiple uses in the military. There's lots of uses for it. There's grease, guns, you need grease. You need the grease. Anyway. Number 8, Rivet Rosie. Every lady out there right now, young and old, has different fits. I just wear what's clean or what makes me look like a stereotypical Canadian. I do a lot of plaid, that's just how it goes. When you get to the club, that's a different fit from the one you wear from going to work, right? Well, despite the glamour and the chicness of 1940s in Hollywood, a lot of ladies had to go to work. Men were at war. You gotta fill the quotas, gotta fill it. Can't exactly show up to the bomb factory in a tight dress and heels for a long day's work. Now can you? No, wouldn't be comfortable. Number 7, red for victory. Mustache Man hated red lipstick. Yeah, I didn't know that either. But when a scary dictator man says no lipstick, that means no red lipstick. Whew, don't want to cross him. The Western Allies took this to their advantage. Marketing for this got a huge boost, as wearing the cosmetics that the angry German man didn't want you to was thought to be contributing to the war effort, and honestly, it was. This is also impartial to inventing pinup girls, or at least the whole culture for them. The ladies all dolled up to stick it to the man in the eagle's nest, and gave the boys overseas something worth fighting for. That's right, ladies. Show them what they're fighting for. Number 6, close shave. This one goes out to all the guys out there that sucked at shaving the first couple times they had to do it. I'm just one of them. Heck, who am I kidding? I'm still pretty bad at it. Maybe you shaved too close and accidentally cut yourself. Shaved against the grain, or maybe you missed a couple hairs. That always happens to me. Keeping yourself groomed in the military is important. Ask any drill sergeant, they'll tell you. But can you honestly imagine trying to shave in a war zone? The only thing I would want to be doing is hiding or telling jokes. I would love to tell jokes in a war, but they don't exactly have private first class jokers, do they? No, they don't. I wouldn't last long, but yes, shaving was a part of military life, completed with a tiny shave kit and mirror whilst under the watch of the enemy. No thank you. Number 5, hysteria. Okay, so what's the first thing people are gonna do when the skies turn to ash and crops perish and it's cold? What will we do? Band together and fight through the elements as humans because we are stronger together? Big prank! No, we panicked and had mass hysteria. And it was our fault and God was punishing us for our sins. Or at least one story from Egypt, that's how the story goes. Sure, I guess this is all bad luck, and it would seem like divine intervention to people back then, especially with the sky being so dark for so long. That does seem like something God would do. And if you think we still don't do that, well, wind the clock back 2 years ago, my friends. Remember when toilet paper was running low? That, my friends, is textbook hysteria. But then again, you know, having a dark cloud in the sky is alright, but there'd be a lot of dark clouds in your pants, you know what I'm saying? You wish you got toilet paper, you know what I'm saying? Number 4, more volcanoes. What's worse than having a volcano cause all these issues? More volcano eruptions, yeah, let's go! Yep, again, no one is sure if there was a specific one that was causing all the issues, but evidence in Iceland suggests that there were at least 2 volcanic eruptions. There's other evidence that suggests it could have been all the way in El Salvador and even North America. A lot of folks just don't realize how catastrophic volcanoes can be, but if you ask somebody in Pompeii, they would tell you. These extra eruptions plunged the earth into what is sometimes called the tiny ice age, as temperatures severely dropped. Well, a couple degrees can make a big difference. It sounds bad, but a couple degrees can. All I'm gonna say is that comedy comes in threes. I'm surprised there wasn't a third eruption. Why is the ground shaking? Number 3, Romulus Phallus. 536. This awful, no good, very bad year likely sealed the fate of the Roman Empire. For a while, she had been in decline, and her capital had already moved east. But like a lot of washed up sober music stars of the 80s, it was time for one more tour. One last hurrah to capture glory in a bottle. Well, go ahead and look at the map of Europe right now. I'll give you a second. Go ahead, sure, look at it. You see that? Yeah, there's no Roman Empire, is there? No. That's because the year 536 was full of disease, war, and uprisings. Pesky uprisings. Ugh, those are the worst. How's a dictator supposed to rule without those? Come on. In the year 541, an estimated 30% of the Byzantine Empire had perished from the plague. That's not good. You gotta have the population there. That's bad. Number 2, Moche trouble. The Moche were a civilization in what is now Peru. That's right, there were troubles back there too. It's not all just Europe. They were extremely dominant of that area, masters of irrigation and fishermen. They made their food stockpiles big, and they were a force to be reckoned with. Had a pretty decent economy too. Well, due to some weather changes in the area, the water temperature rose. Too much. The fish that the Moche relied on for food and economy were now gone. And when you're a single industry empire and that industry goes away, well, it's gonna hurt. This led to massive starvation in the Moche. Funny enough, all this climate change in the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, I know we're jumping all over the place here, but it was good. The climate was okay. They saw more rainfall, allowing for better crops, which allowed them to bring more camels. More camels means more soldiers. More soldiers means more conquering. It's crazy how it works like that. So I guess it just depends where you live. Number 1, economy and survival. All of this makes you wonder how we survived this. Honestly, I'm not sure. Truth be told, it was a matter of just letting it run its course. Sometimes that's the best. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here to talk about it today. Something I find interesting, however, was during all of this, Emperor Justinian tried to raise taxes to aid in the economic downfall they were feeling. Hey, nobody likes taxes being raised, unless the government was gonna make a public beer fountain. I feel like we'd all like that. I feel like everybody'd be okay with that. Yeah, I think so. Between the fog, the plague, the starvation, and the higher taxes that kind of ruined everything, well, I guess we have roads now, right? That's kind of cool. Roads are pretty sweet, right? I guess so. Just a bad time. Stay at 536. Time travelers, stay at 536. You don't want to go there.
Kicking off the list at number 10, accidental science, aka the discovery of penicillin. Sometimes miracles happen when nobody's looking. Alexander Fleming first discovered penicillin back in 1928. At the time, he was actually studying Staphylococcus, which is a bacteria that causes infections, boils, all that nasty stuff. But right before Alexander left for a 2-week vacation, he left a petri dish with some of that Staphylococcus on the lab table rather than storing it away in an incubator. During this well-needed time off, a penicillium mold spore just drifted in there, either through a window or the lab door, some Horton Hears a Who adventure. This tiny speck was well on its best way. It was the perfect conditions for a spore flight. The temperature of the room wasn't too breezy, and the lack of one Alexander Fleming allowed time for the mold to fight back and prevent that bacteria from growing any further. He discovered this antibacterial substance was only produced by strains of penicillium. Yeah, the guy accidentally creates penicillin on his time off. What a great time. The 20s were an odd but brilliant time.
Number 9. Prohibition. It's a law that puts fear into wine-drinking moms and beer-drinking dads across the nation. For there was a time when the sale and consumption of alcohol was banned. That means it was a dry country, not one drop to be had. Except for those found in loopholes and all the other crazy loopholes in the system. And by that, I actually mean organized crime filling the shoes of breweries and other openings like literal underground bars called speakeasies to keep the sauce flowing. You know what I mean. Now, to be fair, there was an issue with drinking back in the day, but there's a few issues with banning it as well. The first being that it was in high demand, like stupid high, even before it was banned. So banning it basically gave a green light to bootleggers and criminals to make millions, and they did. And second, it was America's 5th largest industry, putting many out of work and dissolving a very large portion of tax revenue. No surprise it didn't work out.
Number 8, the work week. Okay, seriously, who do we have to talk to? Who do we have to blame for having to work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday? Dolly Parton has a groovy tune about it, but when did the 40-hour work week start? 1926 is your answer. The Ford Motor Company, of all companies. Yeah, who do you think? They were the first to have factory workers clock in and out 40 hours a week with a weekend. Nice. Whereas before, you maybe had one day off, maybe, depending on what you were doing. Obviously, more time to rest, eat, and clear your mind, maybe work out. This increased productivity, so it spread like wildfire. Cut to today, we're now advocating for a 4-day work week. We're getting greedy, I know. Shorter hours, same workload. Apparently, this is going well. Productivity is soaring. In Iceland, for example, 2,500 workers tested this 4-day work week. That's literally 1% of Iceland's population, so it worked. Pretty big test run. But now 86% of Iceland's workforce have shorter hours. It's great. Seems like we're well on our way. So sorry, Mr. Ford, we're taking back our Fridays.
Okay, number 7, Valentine's Day. Not the most romantic Valentine's Day ever, but maybe one of the most infamous. Back in 1929, organized crime was no joke. It was everywhere. Thanks to Prohibition and a lot of corruption, it was the age of gangsters. However, one incident in 1929 changed things. On February 14th, 1929, 7 gang members were deleted. This proved to be too much for the public at the time, and the final straw in a large string of violent crimes was up. Until this point, a lot of crooks and gangsters like Al Capone were idolized for their lavish lifestyles and ritzy and swanky nights in the town. This, however, was one step too far and helped to further reform in crime, giving a certain FBI predecessor to rise up and eventually found the FBI. The lesson here? Sure, being a gangster is great. Sign your autographs, live like a fat cat in your penthouse, but there's only so much you can get away with. After it was all said and done, Capone got put away too. And if they can get Capone, they can get you.
Number 6, the birth of brands. When it comes to advertisements, you can't even take the bus down the street without seeing hundreds of ads. I'll catch myself staring at a Sunwing ad for 43 minutes just so I can avoid eye contact with Johnny Jingle Keys in front of me. Even growing up, the amount of pop-ups I had to close really fast, my reflexes are so sharp now, all thanks to those gross pop-ups. And it all started 100 years ago. Huge brands began popping up in the 1920s with these fun slogans, big colorful ads. The 20s witnessed the birth of advertisements from Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, Hostess Cakes, Welch's, and of course, one of the most unforgettable, Kool-Aid. Yeah, the Kool-Aid man is 95 years old. Yeah, I bet his knees are starting to feel like glass, that's for sure. Other companies that popped at this time was CVS, the automobile industry obviously, and 2 brothers in California named Walt and Roy Disney. Yeah, they had some startup cartoon studio. Not sure what happened there. Best of luck, guys, keep going. Hopefully they have a GoFundMe maybe.
Number 5, Private Warbear. It wasn't just members of the human species who took part in WW2. No sir, mules, dogs, pigeons, horses, bears. Bears? Soldiers in Poland had come across a bear cub on the side of the road whose mother had been unfortunately removed from this world by hunters. One of these soldiers decided he was going to raise the cub as his own and named him Wojtek. Wojtek was trained by this soldier and a civilian, and eventually he was even enlisted in the Polish army so that he could legally come aboard a British transport ship. Fortunately, he didn't actually do any fighting, but he was given his own paybook, serial number, and the rank of private. He would bunk up with other soldiers, loved beer and cigarettes, and helped transport supplies including heavy boxes of ammunition. Nice.
Number 4, Rough Riders. Okay, think about the toughest guy you know. Maybe it's your dad, maybe it's your uncle, maybe it's you.
Maybe it's me.
No matter who it is, I bet they aren't as tough as Teddy Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States. He was well known for being a man who enjoyed nature, the explorer's man if you will, safari hunter, Nobel Peace Prize winner, soldier, and a big booster for the National Park System. The man did it all, but did you know that during a speech in 1912, President Roosevelt was shot? Gasp. Now before I tell you what happened next, I want you to take a guess what happened next. Did he A, drop to the ground and perish, or B, the assassin was a lousy shot and missed, giving the president a chance to return fire? What's your answer? Type down below. Well, the answer was secret option C. I got you. He was shot and showed the crowd that he was. And then he said, I can no longer make a long speech because I have been shot, where he then continued to deliver an 82-minute speech. What a man.
Number 3, Pepsi Army. Did you know that the company Pepsi actually had the world's 6th largest military for a brief moment in time? Okay, so basically what happened is that Pepsi realized that they were inferior to Coca-Cola, and so they installed AI into their Pepsi cans worldwide, creating an autonomous army of soda cans. No, that's not what happened, you goof. Actually, in 1959, at an American exhibition, PepsiCo tried to prove the great concept of capitalism. Pepsi actually did a pretty good job. But the cash of the Soviet Union wasn't really accepted all over. So, instead, the Soviets traded submarines, military ships, and a lot of vodka for tons and tons and tons of Pepsi. Enough that Pepsi ranked 6th among the world's military powers until it sold all of that.
Number 2, Emu War. Australia, land of sun, beaches, and spiders that got too buff. Too much for me. But today we're talking about my friends from down under. Shout out to the Aussies. Chetty loves you. But we gotta talk about the Emu War, guys. What the heck was going on there? In a nutshell, emus were causing havoc in Australia's agriculture sector and destroying farms at an alarming rate. So the government said, right then, tight ease and get rid of the buggers. A couple of soldiers were given large automatic weapons to deal with the pests. Well, it didn't turn out very well, as the emus just didn't seem to want to eat the bullets. Can you blame them? I can't. One Australian politician jested that the emus should be given medals for their bravery. In the end, the emus won.
Number 1. Free falling. 50 years ago, on January 26, 1972, Vesna Volovi, a flight attendant from Serbia who worked for the Yugoslavian airline JAT, got on board JAT Flight 367 to Copenhagen. Also on board that flight, unfortunately, was a device inside a briefcase that went boom over Czechoslovakia. While everyone else on board did not survive, Miss Volovic was stuck inside the shattered fuselage by a food cart as the plane and Vesna fell 33,000 feet. Thankfully, there were trees to break the fall and snow to cushion the landing near a small Czech village. But Vesna still suffered a skull fracture, broken legs, 3 broken vertebrae, she was temporarily paralyzed from the waist down, and put in a coma, leaving her with no memory of the flight or her descent. While there was some skepticism about the way the flight went down, she still received a Guinness World Record for the longest survived fall without a parachute. So that makes up for everything, right? Yeah.
Kicking off our list at number 10, John Lennon, or should I say Jay Lennon. Here we go. This one comes from 1966. Now, if you're a Beatles fan or a fan of the Lord, you're in for a treat. Here we go. You've definitely heard about this scandal, hopefully. During an interview with a UK newspaper, John Lennon started talking about the group and the band and how their popularity was on the rise. Normal band stuff, whatever, from John Lennon. But when Jay Lennon said the Beatles were more popular than J. Christ, well, people got V upset. He didn't mean anything bad out of it, per se, he just noticed that the Christianity charts were on a decline around the world. Meanwhile, the Beatles are selling out left, right, and center. I get what he's trying to say, but yeah, he definitely messed up here. When a US newspaper printed this exchange months later, Christians were upset. More popular than Jesus. Look, I know what he's trying to say, but still, you can't say that ever. Some radio stations actually stopped playing the band's music altogether. Christians gathered in bonfires to burn albums. Jay Lennon, not Jay Christ, but Jay Lennon, had to apologize numerous times at press conferences. He had to clear everything up just to move on, get some peace, get some forgiveness from the Lord. Number 9, Natalie Wood's death. Natalie Woods was one of the most talented in Hollywood. The actress was in her early 20s and already she was getting Oscar nominations. She's known for West Side Story and Rebel Without a Cause, but when she was 43 years old, Natalie was sailing with her husband, Robert Wagner. They were sailing off Catalina Island in California, and she lost her life. Now, her death was considered an accident at the time. With very little details, it was classified as an accidental drowning. But come 2013, it was changed. It was changed to drowning and other undetermined factors. Wood, her husband Wagner, and Christopher Walken, yeah, who knew? They were all aboard the 60-foot yacht at the time, November 28, 1981. The 3 actors had dinner in the harbor, then returned to the yacht to continue drinking and eating. Wood went missing around midnight, but the new information is that the couple had argued earlier that night. Now this changes things, right? This changes the whole story. And according to a new report, that same report that was changed in 2013 after a different statement was released from the ship's captain, bruises and scratches that were considered fresh were seen on Wood's body. Woods was officially reported missing at 1:30 in the morning that night. So a lot of questions, but I don't know. How do you solve that? How many years later? Number 8, the isolator. All right, a little different, but still definitely weird. This image may seem haunting at first, but it's actually quite ahead of its time. The isolator came long before noise-canceling headphones or lo-fi beats to study and relax to. This goofy-looking helmet was intended to block out noise and finally allow you to concentrate on finishing that Victorian-era paper due the next day. Now, this was back in the early to mid-1900s when inventor Hugh Gernsback worked hours and hours to create this study buddy to block out distractions in life. Now, this is a powerful image because the things that distract us today, like Instagram, Messenger, dating apps, YouTube, none of those things were even a concept back in 1925 when this device was revealed to the public. So you can only imagine what we need now, right? We need like the ultimate isolator. It's just a motorcycle helmet. It's just Daft Punk's helmet turned off, really. That's all we need. Number 7, Mary Pickford. Now, I mentioned earlier how these celebrity scandals often came from their love life and then they have to, maybe there's some stuff happening, maybe they were arguing before, that changes the game. Everyone cares about who's dating who and who's divorcing who. I mean, look how often we bring up Pete Davidson today. I mean, how's the guy doing it? Really, how's he doing it? Now, as hard as it is, we can't judge people off a headline or a scandal or whatever we see. We don't know the full story at all, regardless of what it looks like or what we want it to look like. The silent film star divorced her husband, Owen Moore, around the 1920s, and then she married a man named Douglas Fairbanks right after. Now, when I say right after, I mean less than a month right after. Like Pete Davidson speed. I'll admit that would interest me as well. I'd have my own opinion, sure. Now, the public, at first, they weren't happy with Mary Pickford. They made assumptions about how long this affair had been going on. Oh, she was married, how could she, yada yada yada. Her career was actually on the line because of this scandal, and that was until Owen Moore was confirmed to be a not so great guy. Turns out throughout their marriage, he was a towards Mary. So she went from being almost canceled with no job to the most courageous for telling her story, how the tides have turned. Number 6, portable holding cell. Prisoner transport is always a risky game, right? I have YouTube, I see some stuff that goes on online, it's crazy. When out in public in any way, the odds that something goes wrong or they escape back into the real world and run away, it goes up significantly. The movie Con Air is about this exact situation unfolding. A timeless classic. Nicolas Cage, so good. Dave Chappelle's in that too, wild. Well, back in the 1920s, we didn't have SWAT teams move around the worst of the worst. Instead, we had bike cops with cages. It's pretty funny. This portable jail cell is an early version of our modern day police car. The concept was perfect, but the fact that this guy is sitting in a cell and could just grab the officer on the bicycle at any given moment, that's not so ideal. The fact that he's less than a foot away, that's not relaxing at all. Would you ever ride in one of these? I can barely do a sidecar in a motorcycle, let alone pegs on a bike. I don't know. If I'm not riding, I'm not on the bike, ever.
Number 5, the Reformation. As if Europe wasn't already going through it, how about a little bit of religious civil war? In 1521, Augustinian monk Martin Luther wrote his 95 Theses, basically accusing the Catholic Church of corruption. Most heresies at the time were quietly smothered, but this one was a bit more of a problem thanks to Frederick III of Saxony protecting Luther and bringing about the Reformation. Some may say that this isn't exactly a bad thing, and I feel like people believing whatever they want should be perfectly fine. But at the time, Lutheranism got political and was an awesome excuse to confiscate the Catholic Church's land holdings in Central Europe and Scandinavia, making their rulers rich and giving them enough money to oppose Habsburg dominance. So yeah, sounds totally awesome. Number 4, witch trials. Do you know what else the Reformation did for the world? It successfully brought witch hunting to Central Europe for 200 years! Yay! What's a good way to get rid of anyone who does some stuff you can't explain, don't like, or consider unholy? Accuse them of witchcraft. Oh, they won't admit to being a witch? Let's deprive them of sleep and do heinous things to them until they admit it, because that must make it true. This all really kicked off in 1486, when Heinrich Kramer wrote The Hammer of Witches, which basically said, witchcraft's getting bad, we should step up the punishments. Which is pretty bad when you know that, not too much later, Enlightenment rationalism became a thing, which basically denied the existence of magic and therefore witches and witchcraft. Number 3, burning Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc, the patron saint of France. She claimed she was the prophesied savior of France. She led an army to save the besieged city of Orleans, and she helped to see the prince at the time crowned as King Charles VII. What did she get in return for all this? She was captured by the Anglo-Burgundians and put on trial for 70 different charges, including witchcraft, heresy, and dressing like a man. And after a year of captivity, she was forced to sign a confession that she had never received divine guidance like she had claimed. If all that wasn't bad enough, on the 30th of May in 1431, at the age of 19, she was burned at the stake in the marketplace of Rouen. Luckily, 20 years after her death, Charles VII would get her name cleared, and in 1902, Pope Benedict XV canonized her. Number 2, pirates. While Europe wasn't exactly a very stable place, it was an incredibly wealthy place. And where there is wealth, there are people who make it their goal to forcefully take that wealth. That's right, pirates. North African pirates frequently targeted Catholic Italy, Spain, and Malta in search of captives to sell in Ottoman markets. Harridan Barbarossa and his brother Ursa Ali achieved notoriety in the Mediterranean for sacking the Balearic Islands, robbing Spanish treasure ships, and successfully attacking southern Italy. Christian states such as the Knights of Malta also captured people by raiding Muslim shipping routes and ports. None of this was particularly great for anyone. Captured men were held for ransom or used and sold as labor, but as always seems to be the case, and as I'm sure you can imagine, captured women got the worst of it. Number 1, the bubonic plague. To top our lovely list of happenings, we have a lovely little thing called the bubonic plague. The Black Death ran rampant all over Europe, being carried on fleas that traveled on rodents from roughly 1350 to 1450. This wasn't anything like the pandemic we're dealing with today. This sickness was almost always fatal, and it took out like half of the population of Europe. Since the disease was worse in big cities, which makes sense, the best solution was to move out into the country. That's great, but the only people that could do that were the ones who were wealthy enough to afford it. As you can imagine, the massive loss of life did not bode too well for the economy either. A huge chunk of consumer population just didn't exist anymore. After the plague had pretty much gone away, there was a steep rise in population, think like baby boomers, and that helped bring things back to normal.
Kicking off the list at number 10, dark dining. I don't know about you, but I can't eat in the dark. I need to see every single bite that I'm eating, okay? Call me crazy. Part of me wants to go to a restaurant where you can't see anything, but I know that I won't make it all the way through. I can't do it. I have a thing. I'm not blindly, what if it's not cooked? I don't know. Back in the Victorian era, dining in complete darkness wasn't just a date night. It was actually the best way to digest, or so they thought. That's why many Victorian era homes had their dining rooms set up in their basement. How random is that? Oh, do you guys have poker nights down here? Nah, just brunch. Kill the light. What? How do you like your eggs? Turn off the light. What are we doing? Number 9, Saved by the Bell. I'm sure you've heard about this at some point, but allow me to go into grim detail. In the late 1700s, cholera, bacterial infections, everything bad, you name it, it was all spreading. Not an ideal time to be alive. Many were biting the bullet at this time, of course being gravely ill, but with this came a dark trend. The safety coffin. Yeah, we got the safety dance, now we got the safety coffin. Here we go. These coffins, I mean, God forbid you were buried alive, these safety coffins would allow the dead to rise again and exit said coffin. A lot of these coffins have extra comfort on the inside and, of course, a wire. This wire ran through the coffin, through the ground, and attached to a bell on the outside. So if a passerby heard it, one, that would be so scary, but if they heard it, they would know something's up and they would help them out. Folks would get creative with their safety coffins. For example, a man named Robert Robinson from Manchester, he passed in 1791, but he instructed his family and watchmen to open the special door on his casket, revealing a layer of glass. Now, if anybody were to see condensation, he could then be removed. Patent number 81,437 was actually granted to Franz Vester in 1868. It was an improved burial case, a real patent. This was a real coffin. This is crazy. This one had an air inlet, a ladder, and a bell. All three, there you go. The description of the patent says, if too weak to ascend by the ladder, he could ring the bell, giving the desired alarm for help, and thus save himself from premature death by being buried alive. Nice. You thought you died. Psych, climb this ladder. There you go. Good luck getting out. Now you're in an escape room. Enjoy. You only get 2 hints. Like a little walkie-talkie. Hey, how do I get out of the coffin in room B? Number 8, no air. Now that song's gonna be stuck in your head. Jordan Sparks, a classic. Since we're on the topic of safety coffins, I had to include one more. Maybe 2 more, I'll never tell. This one is fascinating. The science involved here was honestly impressive. There was the classic wire and bell method, but the more sick people got, the more creative they had to become. Like for example, patent number 268,693, John Krischbaum's device for indicating life in buried persons. Yeah, an 1882 classic, we love this. We got the iPod Nano, they got the device O Life. Nice. Upon first glance, you may think this is some type of medieval punishment, whatever, but really this device detects movement whilst providing much needed air. Now you obviously can't have a hole in the ground or else rats will make your real demise much worse than suffocating, right? So John's device here, as per the disclosure details, is that if the person buried should come to life, a motion of his hands will turn the branches of the T-shaped pipe upon or near which his hands are placed. A marked scale on the side of the top indicates movement of the T, and air will then passively come down the pipe. Once sufficient time has passed to assure the person is dead, the device can be removed. Yeah, imagine waking up with this in your hands. I wouldn't be calm enough to turn it and then breathe in a passive amount of air. No way. There's nothing passive about waking up in a coffin. Number 7, bad hair day. Okay, you want it messed up? Let's do messed up. Hope you're not eating any food right now, especially not eating in the dark. 2 red flags. Okay, the Liverpool Daily Post back in 1869 had readers invested on this fateful day. Right on the cover it read, a 30-year-old passed away in the village of Lincolnshire. Now at the time, that's not far off from average life expectancy in the 1800s. But this case was odd. Everyone wanted to read about this. This case was noteworthy. It was important that folks understood what took this young lady's life. Doctors asked the family if they can carry out a post-mortem, and lo and behold, they found a 2-pound solid chunk of hair sitting in her stomach. 2 pounds. Ugh, that's what happened. That's how she met her fate. That's horrible. This ball of hair caused an ulceration of the stomach and ultimately caused her death. The woman's sister did note that over the last dozen years or so, she had casually been eating her own hair. So at this time I say, if you know anybody eating hair, send them this link. It's not a good idea. Cut that out. Stop doing that. Number 6, the Great Famine. Weird time to talk about a famine after the hair incident, but okay, here we go. Back in 1845, a potato crop that a lot of the Irish population relied on was no longer available. This was huge. This is bad history right here. A group of microorganisms wiped them all out, and in result, around 1 million folks died or had to leave. It was draconian law at this point and British ruling that made the exported food hard to reach people. This famine led to Irish independence and anti-union movements. Historical, definitely. Messed up? Absolutely.
Number 5, harmful products. Today, most folks are careful about what they put into them, but back in the day, not so much. When the war started, the military needed a lot of resources, like previously mentioned, and companies had to come up with alternatives. But when coming up with an alternative, testing may not have been done, or at least thorough. That means whatever they made could prove to be harmful to the user, like the radium girls from the First World War. Refer to my other video. My point is, this is a time when products that contain cyanide are sold on store shelves, so anything is possible, which is just messed up. Watch what you're doing. Number 4, good smoke. After a long day of receiving artillery and gunfire from German positions, a GI may not be looking himself, or probably doesn't feel himself either. Early stages of PTSD forming most likely. So what can I do to improve this mood, they ask? And appearance? Why, smoke a cigarette, of course. What else? Smoking culture was huge back then, and it wasn't seen by the public as a health risk. Lucky Strike cigarettes were packaged with soldiers' rations. They were giving out cigarettes. It's just wild. You open up a can, there's my hand, there's my crackers, there's my smokes, I'm good to go. Number 3, nothing left. Unfortunately for a lot of cities in Europe, they got destroyed by bombing raids. Berlin in particular took a pounding. Pictures of the rubbled out city make you wonder how they ever rebuilt it. With that in mind, you can just imagine how beauty and fashion were the last thing on people's minds. Things like food, water, shelter, and fearing the sound of air raid sirens were more of a top priority. 1945 Berlin is not the place to head on down to the department store and pick out a new dress. You wear whatever you can find, and that's about it. Number 2, strapped up. Bang bang, bang bang. If you found yourself to be one of the lovely ladies of the French Resistance, or really any resistance against the Germans during World War II, there was a good chance that you never left the house without your favorite accessory, ladies. Yes, that's right. A firearm. Across many nations in Europe, secret underground rebellions were being organized to overthrow their invaders. Allied forces even airdropped simple-made firearms to resistance so they could get access to a better one with the one they dropped. It makes sense. How very James Bond of you. Oh yes. Behave. Number 1, clean nails. Keep your nails clean and short. It's something I love to do. My nails get too long, I go straight for the pair of clippers. Having clipped nails and less hair was a part of every GI's routine. Besides looking dapper in a trench, the real reason was in case of chemical weapons and any toxic residue getting caught in beards, hair, nails, just anything like that really. Would that work? I mean, sorta, but just not being exposed would be a lot better of an option. Number 10, Titanic. I cannot conceive of any vital disaster happening to this vessel. Modern shipbuilding has gone beyond that. That was a quote from E.J. Smith. Who was that, you may ask? None other than the excellent Navy expert who was the captain of the Titanic. Oof. It would be very funny if not so ironic, or maybe that's where the humor is. Regardless, the Titanic was a headline in the news even before it got wet in the ocean. The largest luxurious vessel ever constructed until now, and it was unsinkable. I don't know about that. What modern times we live in where ships no longer sink? What modern times we live in where ships no longer sink? Well, if you've ever seen Leo smooch Kate Winslet in the back of your grandpa's car, then you know how well that went. The Titanic rests 13,000 feet below the ocean, not too far from the rock bite. That's Newfoundland.
Number 9, Chernobyl. If you've seen the HBO miniseries Chernobyl, then you have a very good understanding of just how terrifying this is. Chernobyl is the site of the Soviet nuclear power plant that in April of 1986 had a serious accident due to a flawed reactor design and staff that didn't really get the best training. The accident itself was explained really well in the show and at the trial that took place, but it resulted in a steam explosion and fires that released 5% of the radioactive core into the environment. The explosion ended 2 workers' lives, with acute radiation poisoning affecting a confirmed 123 people and ending 28 of those people's lives as well. Around 5,000 cases of thyroid cancer with 15 fatal incidents were probably caused by the radioactive iodine fallout. Look, it was not good. It was scary. And what was potentially even scarier was the way people tried to cover it up.
Number 8, Berlin Wall. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. For the younger audience that doesn't know, let me break it down for it. After World War II ended, relations between the West and the Soviet Union broke down, to the point of global destruction. Germany, having lost to all parties during the war, got split up. Capitalist and communist. Trouble is, people living on the capitalist side were just living better, so people began flocking over to the better side. The communist government decided to build a big bad grey depressing wall, monitored by guards with orders to open fire if someone tried getting across with the proper documentation or reasoning. This went on for a few decades until one day in 1990, when the border crossings red tape was cut and the wall began to come down brick by brick. That must have been something to watch, and I can imagine for those who got to witness it, they were glued to their television sets. Very cool. Cool history.
Number 7, One Giant Leap. as most humans know, we have gone to the moon. Unless you think it was faked, in which case please civilly discuss below. But after traveling 240,000 miles in 76 hours, Apollo 11, that's the 11th Apollo mission, entered into a lunar orbit on July 19th, 1969. On July 20th, 1969, two men, American astronauts Neil Armstrong and Edwin Buzz Aldrin, touched down for the first time in the history of the Earth on the surface of our moon. And then 6 hours later, they left their craft and stepped out onto the surface. They left a plaque and some footprints, erected some flags, ran some tests, bada bing bada boom, and then they hopped back in the craft, had a little sleep, and departed on July 21st at 1:54 p.m. Earth time. And we've been back 5 more times since.
Number 6, the Roswell Incident. The Roswell Incident used to be the biggest event to ever happen in New Mexico history. Now it's being shadowed by a bald chemistry teacher, his science enthusiastic student, and a slimy lawyer. Who would have known? Well, for the second most eventful event to ever come out of New Mexico was the Roswell Incident. A mysterious flying object, other known as a UFO, crashed into the desert. Naturally, in the 1940s era US military, they kept secrets, the same way your mom holds on to family tea. Seriously, ask her about that one family member. She's gonna tell you something you don't want to know. This secrecy quickly spread rumors of it being an alien from outer space. Well, it wasn't until the 90s that this incident was officially declassified and declared to be nothing more than a weather balloon. Or at least that's what we were told. This didn't stop the town of Roswell, New Mexico, however, from adopting this alien rumor into the town's very fabric. To this day, the little green man can be found in Roswell as sort of a tourist attraction. Every town needs something.
Take me to your weeder. Take me to your weeder.
Number 5, the Challenger crew. This is a photo that was taken of the, well, clearly the very excited Challenger crew right before when they were walking down the ramp ready to head off on their mission. Now, this photo is chilling, but it's nice to see them happy and together. The crew even included, at the time, 37-year-old Kristen McAuliffe, who was a high school social studies teacher. You may remember this, but your parents definitely do. See, she had won a spot on the mission through a program with NASA called the Teacher in Space program, and she had trained diligently for months in order to be the first ever non-military individual in space. On January 28th, 1986, the Challenger mission proved to be faithful just 73 seconds after liftoff. See, 2 rubber O-rings failed because of the cold temperatures that morning, and on live television, the world had to watch as the spacecraft broke apart and then fell into the ocean, sadly taking the lives of everybody on board the craft. Now, I'm not sure if you've watched the documentary on Netflix, but it's a mini-series about this whole thing and it's powerful stuff. It's really emotional. I just finished it and it's moving. Number 4, the core. This photo shows a physicist named Harold Agnew, and while this photo looks relatively normal and scientific or whatever, a non-threatening photo, what he has in his hands is truly devastating. It changed history. Harold is holding the nuclear core of what was nicknamed the Fat Man. Yeah, that thing. This means that Harold is now holding the nuclear core of the atomic weapon that was later dropped on Nagasaki in 1945. The immediate blast took many lives, as well as the long-term effects of radiation illnesses. Now, it's crazy to look at a photo like this because it seems so perfectly normal when he literally has a life-changing, world-ending device in the palm of his hand, like a literal supervillain holding kryptonite. I couldn't imagine seeing that, let alone holding it. No way. My grandmother wouldn't even hold me as a baby because I was too small and fragile. Think she'd hold this? No way. Butterfingers. Butterfingers galore over there. Number 3, the Ball of Burning Men. January 28th, 1393. You are formally invited to a masquerade ball. How fun is that? Who is it under that mask? Oh, it's just Taylor on Bumblebee. Love him. He's great. The French Queen Isabeau of Bavaria is now hosting one of the most lavish parties of the decade, right? So bring your finest and longest krakows. Roll it in style. Now, when the French royal court was celebrating the marriage of one of the Queen's ladies in waiting, it of course was a big deal. It's fun. It's a big happy day. For some, the best days of their lives. For others at this ball, not so great. Probably the last days of their lives. King Charles VI had 5 companions perform a dance or a theater routine of sorts. Now, they did a performance as beasts. They were committed to the bit, right? They had these big, lovely masks, big baggy outfits, lots of linen, lots of stuffing to appear as if they were real beasts. Now, the party was going well, wine was spilling, people were laughing, beasts were roaring, we were committed, but one rule beforehand was put into place before the party started. Absolutely, positively, no open flames. Obviously, right? I mean, look at that guy. He looks like a couch. We're not gonna put a match near him. It's gonna be chaos. The Duke of Orleans had a little too much fun prior to this event, and he forgot the first rule of Fight Club when he arrived. The guy walked in with a lit torch. He wanted to see everyone. Some accounts say he dropped the torch by accident. Others say he got too close trying to guess the identity of said beasts. Either way, this tragic event took the lives of 4 people, hence the name Ball of the Burning Men. That's terrible, imagine that, what a gig. Number 2, the Stanford Prison Experiment. One of the most well-known experiments of all time was the Stanford Prison Experiment. It was an attempt to investigate the psychological effects of perceived power, and it worked. A little too well, I'd say. Guards and prisoners were all chosen randomly, from college students to anyone, your neighbor. You had no idea. Nobody really knew just how bad this experiment would end up, so anyone volunteered. Those in power were taking it to an extreme level. It was absolute psychological distress. Some of the prisoners went insane. The whole exercise was abandoned after only 6 days, which is not a short amount of time, but historians say just 6 days because it was intended to last much longer. Now, it's shocking to see the lengths people go after receiving power over another human being. I thought I was evil unplugging my brother's controller and like playing, you know, and he wasn't plugged in. This is like next level. And finally, number 1, mummified pets. Are you a pet owner? If so, comment down below which animals fill your house. We love that. Olivia and I want to get a dog so bad. I was always a dog guy growing up. My aunt had 3 pugs. It was the dream. I love it. Ancient Egyptians, they fancied a house pet or two. We know this. But Egyptians saw animals as incarnations of the gods, which I do too with my Shih Tzu, of course. The very concept of having a pet came from ancient Egyptians, so thank you. Egyptians were of course fans of cats. That's common knowledge at this point. But did you know they also had the same idea for hawks, lions, dogs, and baboons? Yeah, baboons. That's amazing. Go ask your parents for a baboon as a pet. There you go. I thought dogs doing their business inside was annoying, but a lion? Your arm's gonna be tired scooping that one up. Many of these animals were often mummified and buried with their owners after they'd passed, just like how many owners today cremate their pets. I mean, I'm not sure I would mummify a Shih Tzu, but hey, whatever floats your boat. Who am I to judge? Other creatures were specially trained to work as helper animals back then. So ancient Egyptian police officers would use dogs and monkeys to help patrolling, then they'd mummify them. What a time, imagine that.